Chapter 2062. In the group of 6, Ling Han posed the greatest threat and had to be killed at the first instant. Otherwise, not only would it endanger their lives, it would also guarantee the Empress and Hunyo's lives, making it difficult to get rid of him. But if they killed Ling Han first, they would have one less powerful enemy, and not only could they win, they could even capture the Empress and Hunyo alive. If there was a chance, they naturally wanted to get intimate with them. After all, these two women were extraordinarily beautiful. In their eyes, the 6 of them could definitely take down Ling Han if they joined forces. After all, the gap in cultivation level between them was obvious. This was applicable in most situations, but it did not work on Ling Han. The strength of his physique had already reached a freakish level, and was not something that a dividing soul tier could break through. Under the simultaneous attacks of 6 peak stage heavenly soul cultivators, Ling Han was continuously hit. Some were indeed because he could not dodge, and some were because he was too lazy to dodge. This physique of his allowed him to be willful enough. His fists shot out continuously, indescribably fast. How is this possible? The speed of his punches is at least 3 times that of ours, and he alone can completely block the attacks of 3 people. Monster! The group of 6 were all stunned. Ling Han's battle prowess was clearly inferior to theirs, but his attack speed was astonishingly fast, completely blocking the attacks of 3 of them. Though there were still 3 people whose attacks could be of use, some were dodged by Ling Han, and some were forcefully taken. Even if the 6 of them ganged up on one person, it was practically useless. Instead, the Empress and Hunyo continuously inflicted damage on them. Though it was not fatal, if the injuries continued to accumulate, it would eventually lead to a qualitative change. "Stop hitting this brat, kill those 2 women first," the middle-aged man in yellow called out loudly. At this moment, he no longer had the slightest bit of hesitation. Compared to his life and future, what were women worth? As long as he was alive, as long as he had status, any beauty would come to him with a wave of his hand. He knew this very well. The other 5 agreed in unison and changed the target of their attacks. This returned to before, when Ling Han spread out the regulations of time and space to split the attacks for the 2 women. However, in this way, the battle once again fell into a stalemate. Ruan Dong looked at bewitching Maiden Ro, a fierce light in his eyes. Of course, he was shocked by Ling Han's strength. A mere young soul had actually managed to block 6 heavenly souls. This was simply unbelievable. However, now that things had come to this, he did not have the time to be shocked. If Ling Han's side won, he believed that he would lose his life. Thus, he set his sights on bewitching Maiden Ro. Why didn't he join the battle? It was because he was too weak. Even if he joined the battle, he would only be a hindrance. Then similarly, bewitching Maiden Ro did not participate because she was weaker. Even Ling Han and the others were only young souls, so bewitching Maiden Ro was only young soul at most. He was an earth soul, and also had the aptitude of a king tier, and could be invincible in this cultivation level. Then, if he faced bewitching Maiden Ro, he would definitely be able to easily win. If they were to take down this seductive woman, Ling Han's team of 3 would surely be thrown into a state of confusion. Then, it was only natural for them to suffer a crushing defeat. He sneered. "Don't think that you can't beat him just because he's weak. On the contrary, his brain is the quickest, and he still needs to rely on him to win." Xiao, Ruan Dongxiang leaped out and charged towards bewitching Maiden Ro. Bewitching Maiden Ro immediately revealed a pitiful expression and said, "I beg you, don't hurt me. I am willing to do anything for you." Ruan Dongxiang's heart instantly palpitated. Bewitching Maiden Ro was seductive to the bone, and this soft plea caused even his bones to melt. Furthermore, this involuntarily caused his imagination to run wild. Bewitching Maiden Ro walked towards him incredibly seductively, her slender waist swaying left and right, exuding boundless charm. Ruan Dongxiang was completely entranced. He clearly knew that it was inappropriate, but subjectively he enjoyed this scene immensely and did not want to make any reaction at all. "Idiot!" A voice filled with mockery rang out. Ruan Dongxiang felt a pain in his chest and hurriedly dodged. he shockingly discovered that there was already a sharp blade in his chest, piercing down from above his heart. If he had not dodged a little in time due to the pain, his heart would definitely have exploded by now. For a dividing soul tier elite, the explosion of their heart was not enough to kill them, but it would cause massive damage, because the blood of the heart condensed the life force of a cultivator, and losing it would cause great damage. He was both furious and hateful and said sternly, "Bewitching maiden, you dare deceive me." Bewitching maiden Ro showed an expression of pity. She had originally wanted to stab the top of Ruan Dongxiang's head, shatter his mind, and kill him with a single strike. But this position was too sensitive, and it was likely that the other would be alerted by a single stab, so it was safer to stab the heart. This was also because her charm techniques were not proficient enough. Otherwise, even if she stabbed the other's mind, Ruan Dongxiang should also be smiling and waiting for death. This lady is a deceitful demoness, are you not convinced? Bewitching maiden Ro snickered. Ruan Dongxiang clutched his chest. He was currently suppressing his injuries. She had used a 4-star pseudo-celestial tool, and the injury from this stab was not something that could be easily healed. Even if it had not truly struck his heart, it still caused his battle prowess to plummet greatly. "Even if I am wounded, I can still easily kill you," he shouted loudly, and charged towards Bewitching Maiden Ro with bloodshot eyes. "In your dreams," Bewitching Maiden Ro said disdainfully. This kind of man who only knew how to bully weak women was the most shameful. The two of them also began to battle. Originally, Ruan Dongxiang should have had the absolute advantage, but because he was wounded, his battle prowess had dropped greatly. Thus, though he still had the upper hand, it was not something that could be done in a short period of time if he wanted to capture or even kill Bewitching Maiden Ro. He was burning with fury, and no longer cared about the situation of his 6 companions and Ling Han's group. He just wanted to capture Bewitching Maiden Ro. He swore that if he captured Bewitching Maiden Ro alive, then he would kill her. If she died, then it would be from childhood to adulthood. He had never been deceived by a woman before, and he had even been heavily wounded because of it. Under his powerful attacks, Bewitching Maiden Ro's situation was also becoming more and more dire. She was completely suppressed, and could not even fight back with a single move. It was very difficult for her to even protect herself. "Haha, how are you going to dodge this move?" Ruan Dongxiang had finally forced Bewitching Maiden Ro into desperate straits. He was very smug, and a palm shot out towards Bewitching Maiden Ro. Not only was he going to capture this woman, he was also going to ravage her. His palm landed, and when his eyes were already not far from that towering chest, a delighted smile appeared at the corners of his lips. His fiancée had run off with someone else. This was a thorn in his heart, and now he could toy with another's woman, which gave him a perverted sense of pleasure. Crush it. His eyes were ablaze, and his palm clawed down mercilessly. His palm landed. Something was wrong. Why was it so empty? Ruan Dongxiang discovered to his shock that his wrist had actually been grabbed by someone, and he could not press down on Bewitching Maiden Ro's proud chest. And the person who had grabbed him was Ling Han. Wasn't this guy currently in a fierce battle with someone else? Ruan Dongxiang immediately came to a realization. He turned his head again, and saw that the yellow-robed middle-aged man and the others had all been defeated. Some had been sliced into 2 pieces, some had been sliced into 6 pieces, and some had been completely turned into mincemeat. Not even a single complete bone could be found. He shuddered and felt his legs go weak. Reading on a cell phone was more refreshing. Chapter 2064. There were quite a few people in the town. Some had dragon heads and human bodies, and some had dragon bodies and human heads, but no matter what they looked like, there was a cluster of oily green on their heads. And in this town, the regulations of gravity actually disappeared. "Please follow me." The dragon-headed man who led the way turned around, and said, leading Ling Han and the others into the town. The entrance of these 4 outsiders did not cause any commotion. The townspeople were still minding their own business, as if they did not realize that a few monsters had entered here. They walked all the way to the center of the town, where there was a temple completely made of wood. There was a green statue at the top, stretching across the entire temple. The dragon's whiskers were extremely realistic, as if they were still fluttering in the breeze. Please. The dragon-headed man continued to lead the way, and brought Ling Han and the others to the courtyard of the temple. Only then did he let them stop. Please take a seat, allow me to invite the elder out. Ling Han and the others all felt a little baffled. They had been invited over by someone they didn't know, yet they didn't explain the situation at all. Anyone would be at a complete loss. After a while, they saw that the dragon-headed man from before had returned, but he was following behind an old man. This old man had a human head and a dragon's body. He was bald and was no longer green, but his eyebrows and beard were still green, so he could not escape the fate of being oily green. This old monk is Na Su. The old man revealed a smile, his eyes shining brightly, exuding a frightening pressure. This was an elite, and should be in existence of the ascending origin tier. Ling Han could roughly judge. Greetings, senior. Ling Han and the others all clasped their hands in greeting. Na Su raised a hand and said, "It's the opening day of the 100 Dragons Mystery Realm again. This old monk has waited for this day for a long time. May I ask, senior, what instructions do you have for summoning us here?" Ling Han asked. Na Su was just about to speak when he saw another old monk walk over, and his brows immediately furrowed. Amitabha. This old monk chanted the name of Buddha, causing everyone's ears to ring, and they almost fainted. This old monk was also very powerful. I'm Na Kong. The second old monk smiled at Ling Han and the other three. I'd like to ask for a favor from the 4 benefactors. 4 young benefactors, it's better to form good karma with this old monk. Na Su hurriedly spoke up as well, looking as if he would be the one losing out if he didn't speak up. Ling Han and the other 3 looked at each other. They were even more confused. What was going on? If you form a good relationship with this old monk can increase the benefits by 3 times when you receive the 100 Dragons baptism. Na Kong said, I promise you that I can increase it by 4 times. Na Su was not to be outdone. 5 times. 6 times. The 2 old monks immediately argued until their faces turned red, and they almost came to blows. Ling Han and the other 3 were even more baffled. Was this an internal strife? May I ask seniors, what does forming good karma mean? Ling Han asked. As the 2 old monks argued, they explained to Ling Han at the same time. Usually, they would argue for 3 sentences before explaining one. With such scattered sentences put together, Ling Han and the other 3 finally understood what was going on. This small town was called Azure Dragon Town. Everyone had the bloodline of the dragon race, but they had been trapped on this divine dragon mountain for generations, unable to leave. No one knew why. In any case, once they left the mountain, they would lose all their cultivation, and then their lifespan would run out, and they would die without a cause. There was only one way to solve this, and that was to open the 100 Dragons' secret realm once every 100 million years. There were 7 tribes in Azure Dragon Town. During the opening of the 100 Dragons' secret realm, the 7 tribes would compete with each other. Whoever obtained first place would be able to obtain a Dragon Ball from the Divine Dragon Temple. Once they gathered 9,999 Dragon Balls, they would be able to summon a divine dragon and bring their tribe out of the 100 Dragons' secret realm alive. However, the candidate for the competition had to be an outsider. That was why there was a competition between Na Kong and Na Su. The so-called forming good karma was to sign an agreement with the tribe they belonged to and fight for them during this period. As time passed, the number of Dragon Balls collected by the 7 tribes was getting closer and closer to the required number. The tribe that Na Kong and Na Su belonged to had the least Dragon Balls, so they were also the most anxious. They were eager to win and catch up with the 5 tribes in front. They were afraid that they would only have one chance to leave. No one wanted to be trapped on this divine dragon mountain forever. Na Kong and Na Su both offered a high price, hoping that Ling Han and the other 3 could join their tribes. No matter how strong Ling Han and the other 3 were, one more person was always one more person. Ling Han did not make a hasty decision. Instead, he decided to wait. He could not rashly agree just by listening to the other party's words. What if the competition was extremely dangerous and people died at every turn? No matter what, he had to understand it clearly first. Although Na Su and Na Kong were anxious, there was no other way. They could only arrange for the 4 people to stay, but they also sent people from their tribes who could speak well to continue to persuade Ling Han and the other 3. All the outsiders were arranged to live in the temple. There was a huge courtyard specially set up for them, using the rules of space. The outside did not seem big, but the inside was a completely different world. Therefore, from the outside, there were many doors installed on the wall, appearing incomparably dense and also very ugly. Many people stopped outside, discussing something with each other. "Newcomer!" Someone came to Ling Han. "Newcomer, come here." A purple-clothed young man immediately shouted at Ling Han and the other 3, with a strong commanding tone. Ling Han just glanced at him indifferently and said, "Didn't your parents teach you how to speak human language?" The purple-clothed young man was immediately so angry that his eyes were spitting fire, and he was about to rush towards Ling Han. "Brother Bao, don't be angry, don't be angry." Someone beside him hurriedly tried to mediate and firmly grabbed the purple-clothed young man. "Let go of me, I want to teach this guy a lesson." The purple-clothed young man struggled with all his might, looking extremely angry. Ling Han chuckled, and his right hand formed a fist and punched the air in front of him. Bang! Endless rules surged, startling the entire universe. After this attack, everyone looked at Ling Han. So strong. He was clearly only a young soul, but his battle strength was actually so strong. He had reached the peak of the Earth Soul stage. No, he had even reached the Heavenly Soul stage, the early Heavenly Soul stage. The purple-clothed young man's mouth was wide open, but he did not make a single sound. His expression was somewhat amused. Let go of me, let go of me." After being stunned for a moment, he shouted again. The person beside him expressed his innocence, because in his shock, he had forgotten to grab the purple-clothed young man. Then where did this "let go of me" come from? Obviously, the purple-clothed young man was afraid of Ling Han, but it would be a loss of face to give up like this, so he could only shout and put on an act. Ling Han cracked a smile and flashed his fist at the purple-clothed young man. "Brother!" The purple-clothed young man immediately pounced over and grabbed Ling Han's fist. "You're my biological brother. I've finally found you." His face was full of excitement. Fuck, this guy was too shameless. Ling Han shook his head and said, "Why did you call me over?" Brother, we're planning to all join a tribe. This way, we'll be able to easily obtain victory without any losses." The purple-clothed young man's face was full of flattery. Chapter 2065. Though this was a cheap trick, it was still a very good strategy. After all, there would be rewards as long as they won, so what was the point of fighting to the death? It would be a complete waste of time, wouldn't it? Ling Han chuckled and nodded. If it could save him some trouble, he had no intention of fighting passionately with others. The purple-robed youth was overjoyed and said, "Brother, you also think this is a good idea, right?" "What's your name?" Ling Han asked him. "Brother, I'm called Polo," the purple-robed youth hurriedly said eagerly. "Pineapple." Hunyo was instantly enraged. "You can't eat it, and you dare to call yourself Pineapple?" Polo only felt aggrieved. It wasn't like he wanted this name. Who asked him to be born in the Bo clan, and his grandfather just happened to give him the name Luo? However, he didn't dare to refute Hunyo and said, "Sister-in-law is right. Sister-in-law is right." Hearing him call her sister-in-law, Hunyo was instantly filled with joy. She felt that although this pineapple couldn't be eaten, he was still a good person. She patted Polo's shoulder and said, "Not bad, young man. You're very self-aware." Hearing her call Polo, young man, in an old-fashioned manner, the people around them couldn't help but laugh. This little girl's flame of life clearly hadn't burned for as long as Polo's, yet she considered herself to be an old person. There was no one else like her. "Yes, yes, yes." Polo nodded without hesitation, looking very much like a lackey. Ling Han also smiled and said, "All right, I've decided to join this alliance." "Who's the leader?" "Help the 4 of us register, and we'll find a tribe to join together in the future." "All right," Polo answered. Ling Han and the others opened the door in the wall, and entered to rest for a while. On this journey, they had obtained a large number of dragon crystals, and Ling Han still had many flowers of Tao that he could share with Hun Yo and the Empress. As for bewitching Maiden Ro, she was forgotten by him. However, when it was time to divide the spoils, bewitching Maiden Ro would naturally shamelessly come over and practically snatch a few flowers of Tao. They settled down for the time being. Firstly, they had to wait for the others to arrive. Secondly, they had to wait for the 7 tribes competition to begin. Ling Han had originally thought that the competition between the 7 tribes was just to let the outsiders they had recruited compete with each other, and the one who won would naturally be the final winner. However, the reality was not so simple. They were going to enter an area where the dragon balls that the 7 tribes needed to collect were stored. Only one would be born every 100 million years. Why do we have to recruit outsiders? That was because only outsiders could enter this area. Even the people of Azure Dragon Town didn't know what they would encounter after entering this area. This was because the last thing they could see was an outsider walking out with the Dragon Pearl. Whichever tribe this outsider represented, the Dragon Pearl would be obtained by that tribe. Ling Han found Do Xiaojun there and asked the landlord about the specific situation of the competition. However, Do Xiaojun did not know much about it. He only heard from the old man that one should never choose a single side. In fact, it was not necessarily a good idea to join a strong team. This made Ling Han very puzzled. Why not choose a single side? Even joining a strong team when there was a fork in the road wasn't a good idea? Do Xiaojun was also not very clear. He also couldn't think of a reason to do this. I don't care what others say. In my opinion, everyone should choose the same tribe to join. This is the most labor-saving method, he said. Ling Han also felt that this choice was not wrong. However, since the old man said this, there must be a reason. The ones in charge of talking to the 7 tribes were the 4 great emperors, Tian Qingyue and other supreme existences. In Pu in heaven and the nearby heavens, no one was more qualified than these 4 people. However, those who had personally witnessed Ling Han and Ji Wuming activating the Black Dragon Bridge did not think so. However, there were not many people like them, so they could not influence the majority of people's opinions. Ling Han did not care. In any case, there was no difference. Tian Qingyue and the other 3 did not make a hasty decision. Instead, they negotiated with the 7 tribes and waited for the best price. Since their choice would affect the fate of the 7 tribes, they naturally had to sell it for a good price. The good thing that the 7 tribes were willing to offer was called Heavenly Dragon Bone Powder. This was formed from the remains of the ancient Heavenly Dragon. It was mixed with soil and diluted many times, but it was precisely because of this that it could be used. Otherwise, the remains of an immortal king were not something that a mere soul could touch. Approaching them would cause their bodies to shatter. What was the effect of the Heavenly Dragon Bone Powder? When 100 dragons infused into one's body, the benefits obtained would increase from double to 10 times. The greater the increase, the more Heavenly Dragon Bone Powder was needed. The Heavenly Dragon Bone Powder was also an incomparably precious treasure to the 7 tribes. It was the remains of an immortal king, and it was left behind by a dragon expert. To these people who had the bloodline of the dragon race, it was naturally even more valuable and beneficial. Therefore, if everyone wanted to join a tribe, no tribe could afford to pay too high a price. Moreover, they were not fools. With so many people joining their own tribe, it would definitely be a sure win. Then why would they pay too high a price? The matter was temporarily at a stalemate. After all, there was still some time before the competition began. Therefore, everyone still had a chance to bargain. Ling Han did not care about this. He went to the people of Azure Dragon Town and asked them where they got their Heavenly Dragon Bone Powder. At first, he only had the thought of giving it a try, but he did not expect that these people would actually tell him. They picked it up in the mountains. It was like an ore. If one found such a stone, it would contain the Heavenly Dragon Bone Powder. Of course, such an ore was very rare. Moreover, there were competitors. The ferocious beasts in the mountains also desired the Heavenly Dragon Bone Powder, which could make them stronger. Here, be it the ferocious beasts or dragon men, they had a clear realm. However, they did not cultivate the laws of heaven and earth, but the special environment created after the death of 100 heavenly dragons. If they left the 100 dragons' mystery realm, the laws they grasped would immediately become zero. This was because the laws they grasped were not recognized by heaven and earth. They could only be used here. In a sense, they were also practitioners of another cultivation system. However, this cultivation system was based on the laws of the celestial realm. Thus, they would still receive the recognition of heaven and earth to a certain extent. At least, their lifespan would not be shaved off as well. And because of this, they did not need to go to any special place to sever their mortal dust and condense a dividing soul. They could completely complete it here. Opening Immortal Palace and Ascending Origin Power were naturally the same. However, their highest achievement was only Ascending Origin, because this heaven and earth was condensed by the mystical power of a celestial king. They could not reach it and could only be a level weaker. Out of curiosity, Ling Han decided to take a walk in the mountains to see if he could get some heavenly dragon bone powder. Because it was too difficult to get heavenly dragon bone powder, the people of the town not only told Ling Han which area he could find heavenly dragon bone powder in, they did not even forbid him from going there. Chapter 2066. Ling Han's group of 4 arrived at the area that the people of Azure Dragon Town spoke of. Of course, it was on the mountain. There was a naturally formed canyon here, with towering mountain walls on both sides. Howling mountain winds blew out from within, and from time to time, there would be a few stones that would whiz in pain if hit on the face. Some of these stones would contain sky dragon bone powder, and if one was lucky enough to fish it out, it would really be a huge gain. The Empress casually waved her hand, and all the flying stones were sucked to her hand. Then, with a light shake, pa pa pa, these stones all turned into dust. There was no sky dragon bone powder. If there was, these stones would not shatter. They obviously could not be as hard as divine metal, but they definitely would not be weaker than 7 or 8-star pseudo-divine metal. After all, it was fused with the bone powder of a celestial king, so how could it not be amazing? Ling Han's group was just about to enter the canyon when they saw another group of people coming from behind. The person in the lead was tall and slender, and naturally had an intimidating might. Tian Qingyue, one of the 4 supreme monarchs of Pu and Heaven. When he saw that there was also Ling Han's group, a hint of disdain flashed through Tian Qingyue's eyes. He was very proud, and naturally did not take anyone seriously. Of course, this was also because he walked quickly, and did not realize that the Empress and Hunyeo had also activated the Golden Dragon Bridge, and Ling Han even stepped onto the Black Dragon Bridge, that was the supreme heavenly Tao. If he knew, his current attitude would definitely not be like this. However, when he saw the Empress and Hunyeo's absolute beauty and bewitching Maiden Rose charm, even Tian Qingyue's eyes lit up, and then he took a few more glances at Ling Han. This brat's luck with women was really enviable. He actually had 3 different beauties that were as beautiful as goddesses as his companions. This was really a bit incomprehensible and unacceptable. Wasn't this like sticking a fresh flower on cow dung? Not only was Tian Qingyue overbearing, even the 9 followers behind him were similarly insufferably arrogant. They probably thought that they could be arrogant just because they had Tian Qingyue as their backer. One person saw the shock that flashed through Tian Qingyue's eyes, and immediately realized that this was a good chance to flatter this lord. He stepped forward bravely, and with a swoosh, he jumped in front of Ling Han and the others, blocking their path. However, he didn't use violence. Instead, he politely bowed and said, "I am Si Konghao. Greetings to the 3 fairies." Fairies, where is Ling Han? Si Konghao was obviously doing this on purpose. He wanted to cast Ling Han aside. If he wasn't convinced and wanted to fight, then he would take the opportunity to beat up Ling Han and make him lose face. At that time, as long as Tian Qingyue appeared and fiercely reprimanded him, not only would he be able to act as a good person, but he would also be able to show off his might. Ling Han couldn't even withstand a single blow, but Tian Qingyue could scold him like a dog, and in an instant, his image would become mighty and tall. To be a lackey to this extent, it was actually quite good. Ling Han waved his hand and said, "A good dog doesn't block the way." Scram. "Hee hee, I don't think I'm talking to you," Si Konghao said in a disdainful tone, his face full of arrogance. What? I just can't stand you. In the distance, Tian Qingyue's footsteps suddenly slowed down, and with him slowing down, the 8 people behind him naturally slowed down as well. How could they possibly overtake him? With Tian Qingyue's intelligence, he obviously guessed what Si Konghao wanted to do. He couldn't help but smile and didn't stop him. In his mind, it wasn't that he was moved by the Empress and the other 2 girls. He just admired their absolute beauty and style, and he really did think that Ling Han wasn't worthy of the 3 girls. Thus, if he could let the Empress and the others see Ling Han's true colors, he felt that he was helping the 3 girls. Of course, he definitely wouldn't purposely show off. That would be too deliberate and low class, and he disdained it. If he, Tian Qingyue, wanted to pursue any girl, who would reject him? Ling Han laughed and said, "Trash, some bootlicking can't be done randomly because you don't know how strong the enemy you're provoking is." You mean that you're very strong, and I've wrongly provoked you? Si Konghao raised his eyebrows and continued to disdain Ling Han. He couldn't wait for Ling Han to make a move. Ling Han nodded. You're ridiculously wrong. A mere sun soul, I can suppress you with one hand, Si Konghao said with a scoff. Previously, every registrant would register their own cultivation level, and when they received Sky Dragon Bone Powder in the future, it would be distributed according to each person's cultivation level. He didn't think that everyone would get the same amount of Sky Dragon Bone Powder, right? How could that be possible? Thus, Si Konghao knew that Ling Han and the others were only in the Sun Soul tier, while he was in the Heaven Soul tier and had the talent of a King tier. Even if Ling Han and the others were Monarch tiers, they could only kneel in front of him and bow down to him. Such a despicable guy, let Niu beat him up, Hu Niu said angrily. Her ferocity exploded, and she bared her 2 little canine teeth. Ling Han stopped the little girl and said, "Let me. You can't stand 3 moves from me." Si Konghao increased the intensity of his provocation. Ling Han wasn't angry at all, because the words of this kind of person obviously weren't worth it. He smiled faintly, and threw a punch at Si Konghao. Wung, 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 seals appeared on his right hand, and his punch seemed to be able to shatter the sky. Can't even withstand a single blow. Si Konghao also threw a punch in return. Peng, their fists collided, and instantly, the light of regulation burst out in chaos. Ling Han staggered back 7 steps, then steadied himself and said with a smile, "Justice." Si Konghao didn't retreat. He had the upper hand in this blow, but his expression wasn't the slightest bit bad, because this was completely different from what he'd expected. A mere Sun Soul tier actually had such powerful battle prowess. Even Tian Qingyue revealed a cautious expression. He could suppress Si Konghao with one hand, and if Ling Han couldn't even defeat Si Konghao, then it was even more impossible for Ling Han to be his match. However, Ling Han was only slightly weaker than Si Konghao, and this kind of battle prowess was too shocking. Even he was only at this level in the past. This was a top-tier monarch tier, and his talent in martial art was definitely not weaker than his. Si Konghao was stunned, and then he flew into a rage out of humiliation. He actually dared to mock him? Go to hell. He gave a light shout, and his fists moved continuously. With every punch, a ray of flowing light shot out, and in an instant, there were hundreds of rays of flowing light falling towards Ling Han, sealing off all of Ling Han's escape routes. Although he didn't show mercy just now, he didn't use any celestial arts. Now that he used Meteor Fist, his battle prowess increased by a large amount, and he could still finish off Ling Han in the remaining 2 moves. A fierce light flashed in Ling Han's eyes. Si Konghao was trying to kill him. You were ruthless and merciless to me, so don't even think about getting me to show mercy. You were the one who provoked me first. Source collision. Boom, Ling Han's entire body glowed, and then a terrifying ray of light shot out from his body, shooting towards a cone-shaped area in front of him. Not good, quickly retreat. Tian Qingyue was shocked. This kind of attack was comparable to his full strength. If Si Konghao was hit by such an attack, he would definitely die immediately. But he shouted very loudly, and the key was that Si Konghao didn't have the time or space to dodge. Chapter 2068. That was Zhu Huiyun. If Ling Han had thought of coming here to search for the Sky Dragon bone powder, there was no reason other people wouldn't have thought of it. Wasn't that so? Tian Qingyue and Zhu Huiyun had come. When it was Zhu Huiyun's turn, Tian Qingyue couldn't help but look away. He didn't want to lose his composure in front of this old rival. Fairy Zhu, that's him. A man in green pointed at Ling Han from behind Zhu Huiyun. Why are you pointing at me? Ling Han glared at that person, his eyes a little fierce. He had just fought, and it was against a strong opponent like Tian Qingyue. His spirit was at its peak. I heard from Zhe Zhu that you activated the Black Dragon Bridge. Zhu Huiyun said to Ling Han. What? Tian Qingyue cried out. How was this possible? The Black Dragon Bridge was also known as the Sovereign Heavenly Path. No one had ever set foot on it since the 100 Dragons' secret realm had appeared. This was called an impossible miracle, and only the sovereign of the world could conquer it. But a ninth heaven celestial king was equal to the world. How could there be a sovereign that surpassed the world? Tian Qingyue realized he had lost his composure and hurriedly shut his mouth. He looked at Ling Han, the jealousy in his eyes even more obvious. Although it had never happened before, Tian Qingyue didn't think Zhu Huiyun was mistaken. Ling Han's strength had reached an inconceivable level. He was able to fight him at the Sun Soul realm, which was far beyond the Emperor realm. It was reasonable that he could activate the Sovereign Heavenly Path. Why didn't this honor belong to him? Tian Qingyue clenched his fists tightly, suppressing the urge to attack. Ling Han glanced at Zhu Huiyun. He hadn't interacted with this female emperor before. He nodded and said, "That's right." There were too many people who saw this scene. There was no need for him to hide it, and he couldn't. Zhu Huiyun nodded and said, "My master once made a divination. If the Sovereign Heavenly Path is activated, one can obtain the Flower of Tao. I believe Brother Ling has gained something?" Ling Han's pupils involuntarily constricted. This woman's master was most likely a ninth heaven celestial king, or at least an eighth heaven celestial king. Otherwise, it would be impossible for him to deduce such a secret of heaven and earth. He did not comment and only smiled faintly. This had already touched upon his secrets, so there was no need for him to answer. "Brother Ling, please sell me 10 Dao flowers," Zhu Huiyun said. What a big appetite! Ling Han had harvested 17 Dao flowers in total, which he split with the 3 women. Each of them only had 5 on average. Zhu Huiyun had started off with 10. Even if Ling Han didn't share them with the 3 women, he'd only have a few Dao flowers left after selling them to Zhu Huiyun. More importantly, the Dao flower was different from the dragon crystal. It was far more precious and couldn't be measured by star stones. It must be known that this was a treasure that could only be obtained by stepping on the Black Dragon Bridge. In the past epoch, only Ling Han and Ji Wuming had managed to step on it. Ling Han shook his head. "What Dao flower? I've never seen one." "Brother Ling, that's not very nice of you." Zhu Huiyun's pretty face darkened slightly, and she gave off a dignified air. When a monarch was angry, of course the weather would change. "And who are you?" the Empress said, boundless might rippling out. Although her cultivation level wasn't high, her aura was shockingly strong. This was something she was born with, and no one could imitate it. Zhu Huiyun was already a bit angry, and now her pretty face was covered in a layer of frost. She pointed at the Empress and said, "You dare to be rude to me?" "You're the one who asked to be slapped," Ling Han said indifferently. "I don't have a habit of hitting women, but if you still want to pester me, then I won't be polite." "Hee hee, do you really think that you're invincible just because you activated the ultimate heavenly Tao?" Zhu Huiyun said disdainfully. Cultivation level was a big disadvantage. The two of them were separated by a whole 3 minor levels. Including her monarch level, that was a total of 5 steps. How could Ling Han say something like that? Even if Ling Han stepped onto the ultimate heavenly Tao, he would at most cross 4 steps. "Zhu Huiyun, don't underestimate this person," Tian Qingyue said with a serious expression. "Let's work together and split the flower of Tao evenly." Zhu Huiyun started and then blurted out, "You fought him?" If that wasn't the case, why would he suggest working together? Wait, Tian Qingyue definitely hadn't taken down Ling Han. Heavens, this guy was just a young soul. Underestimating him, truly underestimating him. How could a person who could step onto the ultimate heavenly Tao be measured by common sense? Although Tian Qingyue wasn't willing to admit it, he wanted to kill Ling Han, and he wanted the flower of Tao even more. After a moment of thought, he still nodded. Although Zhu Huiyun already had such a guess, seeing Tian Qingyue personally admit it, she still couldn't help but be shocked. There was actually such a nature-defying person. She immediately revealed a strong killing intent. If such a genius wasn't killed, she wouldn't be able to eat or sleep in peace. Alright, let's work together and kill this person. She was incomparably decisive and immediately made her decision. Tian Qingyue nodded. He couldn't kill Ling Han alone, but with Zhu Huiyun, there was a great possibility. They could take down Ling Han, and then use the laws as a furnace to refine Ling Han alive. Under the grinding of the great Tao of heaven and earth, even the strongest physique was nothing more than dregs. The two supreme emperors revealed strong killing intent. The number of times they worked together with others was pitifully low, let alone against someone 3 minor realms lower than them. If word of this got out, no one would believe it. At that moment, a figure suddenly swept over from the distance. He was astonishingly fast, and behind him were 2 people who were similarly ridiculously fast. The person in front suddenly stopped and said to Ling Han, "What? You've run into trouble?" He was Ji Wuming. Just as Ling Han was about to speak, he saw the 2 people behind Ji Wuming stop as well. They were Xiahou Tong and Yu Huaqing. All the supreme emperors who had entered this place had actually all arrived. "Why aren't you running anymore?" Xiahou Tong said coldly to Ji Wuming. Ji Wuming glanced at him indifferently and sneered, "I can't be bothered to tangle with you guys. Do you think I'm afraid of you?" Hee, what arrogant words. Yu Huaqing's lips curled up, his expression very arrogant. Tian Qingyue and Zhu Huiyun, on the other hand, were a little baffled. 2 monarch tiers who were equally as famous as them were actually chasing after Ji Wuming together, and they were just about to join forces to capture Ling Han, yet Ling Han and Ji Wuming seemed to know each other. Thinking about it, it seemed quite strange. Ling Han came to a realization. These 2 are also after your Tao flower, right? They're just 2 clowns, Ji Wuming said calmly. Ji Wuming said calmly. In the entire world, the only person he could consider as an opponent was Ling Han. So what if Yu Huaqing and Xiahou Tong's cultivation was higher than his? He had been a 9th heaven immortal king back then, standing at the peak of the immortal Tao. He had seen far too many peerless geniuses like Yu Huaqing and Xiahou Tong, and he had killed far too many of them. How could his heart waver? Hearing Ling Han's words, Tian Qingyue, Xiahou Tong, and the others also came to a sudden realization. So it turned out that their target was the same. It was just that their target was different. Then let's not interfere with each other. Chapter 2069. They didn't interfere with each other. It was very simple. Zhu Huiyun and Tian Qingyue would continue to fight Ling Han, while Xiahou Tong and Yu Huaqing would continue to keep an eye on Ji Wuming. Of course, the spoils of battle would go to each other, and no one would keep an eye on each other. Yes. The 4 thearchs all nodded. Ji Wuming revealed a sinister expression. He had killed many 9th heaven celestial kings, so what were a few puny heavenly souls to him? Even though Tian Qingyue and the other 3 were called peerless thearchs, in his eyes, they were just slightly talented. How many of these 4 could reach the 5th heaven celestial king level or higher? The highest they could achieve was probably the 8th heaven celestial king. How could they be valued by Ji Wuming? Disobey my will to kill. I originally didn't want to lower myself to your level, but do you really want to seek your own deaths? Ji Wuming said darkly, a strong killing intent flowing in his eyes. You really don't know your place, Yu Huaqing said coldly. Cut the crap. Kill. Xiahou Tong said impatiently. To him, a mere sun soul could naturally be taken down with a wave of his hand. If not for the fact that Ji Wuming was really good at running, how could he have chased him until now? But did running mean he could fight? Obviously not. The 2 of them attacked first. They were extremely vicious and wanted to kill with a single move. It wasn't that they valued Ji Wuming too much, but they were afraid that he would gain the upper hand. Thus, they attacked heavily at the first moment, wanting to snatch Ji Wuming's spatial container. They could only be at ease if they found it themselves. Idiot! Ji Wuming laughed coldly. His body suddenly moved like a ray of light, attacking Xiahou Tong. A huge battle immediately erupted. Ji Wuming was truly savage. Even though he was fighting 1 against 2, he still took the initiative to attack. As he activated his celestial techniques, his battle prowess skyrocketed. Even though he was fighting 1 against 2, he was still not at a disadvantage for a short period of time. This naturally caused Xiahou Tong and Yu Huaqing to turn pale with fright. Just like how Tian Qingyue had been shocked by Ling Han's strength, the two of them had never imagined that a sun soul could be so powerful. However, after a few moves, they had an idea of what was going on. Ji Wuming was indeed strong, but he was still restricted by his realm. The reason why this fellow was so ferocious was because his grasp of the laws had reached an extremely fine level. In this way, the immortal technique could erupt with even greater power in his hands, while the power of his opponent's immortal technique would be weakened by several levels. The difference of 3 small realms was actually forcefully wiped out. No, in fact, Xiahou Tong and Yu Huaqing's combined strength was slightly stronger. However, it wasn't something that could be done in a short period of time if they wanted to take down Ji Wuming. Therefore, the battle was extremely intense. It was definitely not something that could be decided in a short period of time. On the other side, Tian Qingyue and Zhu Huiyun were fighting Ling Han together. They didn't have a clear upper hand either, because Ling Han's origin collision was meant to destroy an area. It didn't matter how many people there were, as long as they were within the area, they would suffer the same attack. Therefore, as long as Ling Han wasn't exhausted, the pressure he exerted on Tian Qingyue and Zhu Huiyun would be the same. Both sides were engaged in an extremely intense battle. Any shockwave from their battle would definitely be able to blast an ordinary heavenly soul into smithereens. Drama's followers were already stunned. As for Yu Huaqing and Xiahou Tong, they naturally had their own men. However, they arrived slightly later than them. By the time they arrived at the 2 battlefields, all of them were flabbergasted. The 4 most powerful members of the Pu and Heaven's younger generation were actually working together to deal with one person. Good heavens! Would anyone believe that? Ling Han, let's join forces, Ji Wuming suddenly said. He wasn't someone who would just say that. Before he even finished speaking, he had already struck out with his palm, creating 2 black heavenly swords that slashed at Tian Qingyue and Zhu Huiyun. Ling Han thought that there was something wrong with his ears, but when he saw Ji Wuming attack, he didn't doubt that there was something wrong with his eyes as well. Ji Wuming really wanted to join forces with him. Ling Han was shocked, but he didn't slow down at all. He struck out with both fists, activating the origin collision as he attacked Tian Qingyue and Zhu Huiyun. When Xiahou Tong and Yu Huaqing charged over, he took the initiative to block them with his body. Bang bang. The attacks of the 2 emperors simultaneously landed on Ling Han's body, but they only sent him flying. He didn't even spit out a mouthful of blood. This caused Xiahou Tong and Yu Huaqing's eyes to almost pop out of their sockets. The 2 of them had joined forces and landed a solid blow on Ling Han's body, but they couldn't even make him spit out blood. This was insane. However, the 2 of them were emperors after all, and they quickly regained their senses. They continued to attack Ji Wuming. They had previously agreed not to interfere with each other's business and not to steal each other's business. Tian Qingyue and Zhu Huiyun did the same. They only focused on attacking Ling Han. But in this way, Ling Han and Ji Wuming had a considerable advantage. Each of them had 2 people who would not attack them, and with their teamwork, it was equivalent to a 2-on-2 battle. In an instant, their disadvantage had been reversed, and they were no longer at a disadvantage on the battlefield. "Don't tie your hands," shouted Zhu Huiyun. Although she was a woman, she was more decisive than most men. "The 4 of us will join forces and kill these 2 together." Although it was still 4 against 2, it was 2 against 1. It couldn't be said that they were working together. All right. Tian Qingyue and the other 2 nodded. Peak emperors naturally didn't lack decisiveness. With the 4 of them joining forces, their battle power immediately soared. Ling Han shouted, "I'll be in charge of defense. You'll be in charge of offense." All right. Ji Wuming immediately nodded, agreeing without hesitation. Ling Han summoned his split soul, no longer using origin collision. Instead, he acted as a meat shield, blocking all the attacks from Tian Qingyue and the other three. Of course, it was impossible to block all of them. But as long as he blocked most of them, Ji Wuming would be able to easily resolve them, freeing up his hands and feet to unleash a powerful attack. How terrifying would a Ji Wuming who didn't need to worry about defense be? It was indescribable. His battle experience was more than 100 million times that of Tian Qingyue and the other 3+ Ling Han. His attacks were like quicksilver, penetrating every opening. His ability to find and seize opportunities was something that Tian Qingyue and the others couldn't compare to. Once he released his defense, Ji Wuming became the sharpest spear in the world. Immediately, Tian Qingyue and the other three roared in anger. They felt a terrifying pressure. Kill this person first. The four of them stared at Ji Wuming. Unfortunately, Ling Han was standing in front of them, using the regulations of space and time to turn himself into a human punching bag. He took on all of the attacks, and the four of them actually couldn't hit Ji Wuming at all. Haha. Ji Wuming laughed loudly, his attacks becoming even more carefree. He really was a strange person. When he said that he wanted to work together with Ling Han, he had absolute trust in Ling Han. He didn't care about any attacks that came his way, focusing all his energy on attacking. This caused Ling Han to break out in a cold sweat, but he also felt indescribably happy. This kind of battle partner was really too good. Chapter 2070. A Beautiful Romance. When Ling Han and Ji Wuming worked together, it was equivalent to the strongest shield in the world being paired with the sharpest spear. This combination could only be described as perfect. Even though Tian Qingyue and the others were all top-notch emperors and had a massive advantage in terms of cultivation, they could do nothing against Ling Han's physique. On the contrary, Ji Wuming's attacks were like a tide that came wave after wave. They were like mercury that flowed into the ground and penetrated every opening. The four emperors were all in a sorry state, and all of them were bleeding profusely. Ji Wuming had grasped many powerful celestial techniques, and he used them without any qualms, giving them a headache. Defend! Defend! Tian Qingyue hurriedly shouted. Otherwise, they could only be beaten and would be exhausted to death sooner or later. The four emperors worked together to defend, and the situation immediately took a turn for the better. No matter how powerful Ji Wuming's attacks were, how could they penetrate the defenses of the four emperors? After all, Ji Wuming was only at the Sun Soul tier. If he reached the Heavenly Soul tier and did not need to focus on defense, he would definitely be able to instantly shatter the combined defenses of the four emperors. Once they adopted a defensive stance, the situation of the four emperors immediately stabilized, and they began to plan a counterattack. This was a test for Ling Han. Previously, they had been constantly attacking, and Ling Han did not need to think much. In any case, when their attacks came, he only needed to defend. But now, the four of them would only attack when they were caught off guard. This was slightly impossible to defend against, and Ling Han needed to raise his concentration. Otherwise, if an attack landed on Ji Wuming, it could lead to a great disaster. Ling Han felt that it was strange. Previously, he and Ji Wuming had fought to the death, and both sides had the thought of destroying the other. Furthermore, they were extremely determined to do so, but now, they were working together happily. Furthermore, Ji Wuming had completely left his back to him. This was something that he had never expected. Do you think this will be useful? Ji Wuming said darkly. He shook his right hand, and a sword appeared in his hand that exuded a chilling aura. Emotionless sword, a celestial weapon. Shwa, the sword swept out, its might surging. Even if a celestial weapon had not been awakened, just its innate sharpness was enough to cause any warrior below the Celestial King stage to suffer. Unless one's battle prowess far exceeded that of the immortal artifact, they would be able to knock it out of their hands with a single punch. Otherwise, as long as they held it in their hands, it would be an incomparably powerful killing weapon. Ling Han's physique was strong enough, but he still did not dare to let the broken emotion sword touch him. The expressions of the four emperors changed drastically as soon as the sword was drawn, and all of them retreated in succession. What kind of fucking pseudo-immortal artifact is this? Why is it so terrifying? No, this isn't a pseudo-immortal artifact, it's an immortal artifact. Tian Qingyue suddenly cried out. His master had an immortal artifact, and he'd had the chance to come into contact with it. That supreme aura made him feel both reverence and admiration. What? Xiahou Tong and the other two were incomparably shocked. Immortal weapons, this was a treasure exclusive to immortal kings, and not even immortal kings could have one. Only powerful immortal kings were qualified to have one. This was a symbol of status and strength. However, a mere Sun Soul stage cultivator actually had a celestial artifact. How could anyone believe that? Shwa shwa shwa. The broken emotion sword danced through the air, and flashes of sword chi surged through the air. If one was struck by the sword chi, the destructive power would not be much weaker than being directly struck by the blade of the sword. The alliance of the four emperors instantly collapsed. They were like a husband and wife that had encountered a great calamity and hurriedly flew off in different directions. A celestial king-tier precious tool. Who could contend against it? Unless an immortal palace tier elite appeared now, and he did not need to use the fourth or fifth secret, and only needed to reach the first secret. The immortal palace tier was an absolute suppression against dividing soul tiers. So what if the four emperors were so powerful? In front of a first secret, they were still no match. Thus, if an elite of the first secret attacked, he would instantly be able to force Ji Wuming's celestial sword out of his hands. No, as long as a single punch landed, Ji Wuming would basically be turned into a mist of blood, and only the celestial king-tier precious tool would fall to the ground. But now, the four emperors could only flee in a sorry state. With Ling Han as a meat shield, they could not do anything to Ji Wuming at all. Apart from fleeing in all directions, what else could they do? The eyes of the followers all bulged out, their faces filled with disbelief. How was this possible? How was this possible? In terms of cultivation level, the four emperors were all heaven souls, and could crush yang souls. In terms of talent, Tian Qingyue and the others were all super emperors, so how could anyone possibly surpass them? And in terms of numbers, didn't they still have the upper hand when fighting 4 against 2? But even so, they were still beaten to the point where they covered their heads and fled like rats, like stray dogs. Heavens, Ling Han and Ji Wuming were really too powerful, weren't they? As expected of supreme prodigies that had ascended to the sovereign heavenly Tao, forcefully making the impossible possible. However, when the four emperors ascended the Golden Dragon Bridge, an eighth heaven celestial king had appeared afterwards. Now, even the supreme heavenly Tao had been drawn, and it was 2 people at that. What kind of existence would appear that could crush all living things? Everyone could only suck in a breath of cold air, feeling their scalps go numb. Perhaps they were going to personally witness the rise of 2 supreme emperors in the future. Retreat. The 4 emperors no longer had the intention to continue fighting. They could not break through Ling Han's defenses, and were being beaten into a complete mess by Ji Wuming, so what meaning was there in continuing to fight? Shio. Tian Qingyue and the other 3 all fled in 4 different directions. Ling Han and Ji Wuming didn't chase. Firstly, their speed was about the same, and they might not be able to catch up. Secondly, this might be a trap set up by the 4 emperors. If they continued to chase, they might fall into a trap. Ling Han, if it wasn't for the fact that I have a reason to kill you, I really want to be friends with you. Ji Wuming put away the broken emotion sword, but he didn't suddenly attack Ling Han. Ling Han smiled slightly. Same to you, same to you. That battle just now had also been very satisfying for him. The next time we meet, I will use everything I have to kill you. Ji Wuming's tone turned cold, and his eyes emitted intense killing intent. You better pray that you won't be turned into dregs by me. Ling Han went tit for tat, not at a disadvantage. Ji Wuming laughed loudly. That was a kind of admiration that came from meeting one's match, and not a mockery of Ling Han's overestimation of his own abilities. He rolled up his sleeves and took the lead to enter the gorge. Ling Han watched his figure disappear and said, "Let's go as well." The Empress and the other 2 girls all nodded, their eyes filled with passion as they looked at Ling Han. This man was too mighty and domineering, causing their hearts to surge. They couldn't control themselves, and wanted nothing more than to throw themselves into his arms and be domineeringly kissed and fiercely possessed by him. The four of them also entered the gorge, but they didn't follow behind Ji Wuming. This gorge was very big, and there was no need to follow the same path at all. After entering the gorge, they discovered that the wind here was extraordinarily strong. Previously, they had only experienced a sliver of its might outside the gorge, but now, it was truly fierce. When a gust of wind blew, rocks would fly everywhere as if an elite had attacked, covering the sky and covering the earth. Even with Ling Han's physique, he still felt pain from the blows. After withstanding a few blows, he didn't dare to face them head-on anymore. He used his movement techniques and leaped between the rocks. On the other hand, they still had to collect the rocks. There might be heavenly dragon bone powder among them. But in the midst of the strong wind, these rocks were not easy to collect. Every time they collected a rock, it was as if they had been struck by a supreme elite, shaking their internal organs to the point that they felt like vomiting. Thus, after staying here for only a day, Ling Han and the others had no choice but to retreat to Azure Dragon Town to rest and reorganize. Chapter 2072. The Bronze Tribe was the tribe that the old monk Na Su belonged to. At first, they tried their best to recruit Ling Han and the others, promising very good conditions, but this time, the old monk couldn't be bothered to see the five of them and randomly sent a youngster to dismiss them. It was very simple. Though the contest hadn't started yet, the result was already decided. The old monk Na Su was in a bad mood, and naturally couldn't be bothered to respond to Ling Han and the others. Ling Han, however, was in high spirits, and started to chat with the youngster, and then continuously raised the price. Finally, the Bronze Tribe had no choice but to be pestered by Ling Han, so they agreed to give them enough Sky Dragon Bone Powder, which would increase the benefits they received tenfold when the 100 dragons filled their bodies. Of course, there were conditions. It wasn't like Ling Han and the others could obtain this Sky Dragon Bone Powder just by participating in the contest. They would win the Dragon Balls for the Bronze Tribe. If they won, they would receive the reward. Anyway, there were only 5 of them, and for the Bronze Tribe, this kind of price was completely acceptable. Though that was the case, the Bronze Tribe didn't have much hope, because Ling Han's side was really too weak. Though there were precedents of the weaker side winning in history, the difference in power was definitely not so great. The other 5 great tribes obviously had even less hope of winning, because they didn't even have someone to represent them in the contest, so this time, they could only watch the show. Thus, the choice of Ling Han and the others was a huge joke to them. When the news spread, the whole Azure Dragon Town was in a state of joy, talking about such an interesting matter. This made Hu Niu and Bewitching Maiden Ro full of pent-up anger. Bewitching Maiden Ro, who swore to give those guys a good beating during the contest, also became hardcore. Though the Empress didn't say anything, the fury in her eyes was obvious. Amidst such anticipation, the contest was finally about to begin. All the outsiders were brought to a canyon, but it was not the canyon where they could obtain the heavenly dragon bone powder. This canyon was very flat and long, and had a total of 7 entrances, 1 for each tribe. But now, only 2 tribes needed to participate in the competition. Moreover, the Bronze Tribe was only here to accompany the Crown Prince in his studies and join in the fun. Ling Han, Ji Wuming, and the others entered the passageway. However, there was a boulder blocking their way. This rock was known as the Broken Dragon Rock, and it had been lying there for hundreds of millions of years. Only when the battle for it began would it move on its own. Otherwise, even ascending origin tier elites would not be able to do anything to it. Ling Han's group of 5 stood in front of the boulder, waiting quietly. The rules of the competition were simple. It was a battle that would last for 10 days. After 10 days, the side with the most survivors would be the winner. From this point of view, the side with more people had a huge advantage. Simply put, as long as they gathered together and formed a defensive circle, as long as they could hold on for 10 days and the number of survivors exceeded 5, they would win. "It's time to start a massacre," Ji Wuming said calmly, as if he wasn't talking about killing people, but rather slaughtering a few chickens and ducks. Meanwhile, Hunyo was rubbing her palms together. She was already itching to explode some people's asshole. She had long since prepared a long iron rod, and it was 4-star pseudo-divine metal at that. Before Ling Han had time to let the divine demon sword swallow it, the little girl coyly asked for it. Long, the broken dragon rock suddenly moved, rolling towards the inner parts of the gorge. The earth was shaking, and very soon, they could no longer find this boulder. The battle between the 7 tribes had officially begun. Streams of black gas suddenly appeared beside Ling Han and the others, taking the form of humans. They had no faces, no feet, and only long arms that floated about half a foot off the ground. What the hell is this? Ling Han and the others simultaneously assumed a defensive stance, and Hunyo even slashed out with a finger, slashing out a piercingly cold ray of light that shot towards one of the streams of black gas. Pooh, the ray of light slashed out, and a hole appeared where the heart of the black human figure was. However, the human figure did not dissipate. Instead, it slowly condensed and returned to its original form, floating and swaying. These black human figures did not launch a counterattack towards Ling Han and the others, as if they were just a cloud of smoke. Ling Han looked closely and saw that there was an extremely shallow mark on the heads of these black human figures. That was because the black gas was relatively dim, and that was why such a mark would appear. He had seen this mark before. It was the mark of the Bronze Tribe. According to this, these black human figures were on their side. What was their use? Could they fight? Ling Han suddenly thought of what Dou Xiaojun had said. The stronger side might not necessarily win. Could it be that this turning point was due to these black human figures? Suddenly, these black humanoid figures moved and floated forward. Follow. The 5 of them all walked together with the black human figures. If they kept moving forward, they would reach the middle part of the gorge. The 7 passages were all like this, and they all gathered in the middle, just in time for the 7 tribes to start a fierce battle. Ling Han counted. The number of black human figures was about 200 to 300, and this was more or less the number of all the outsiders. Could it be that they were making up for their lack of numbers? That was why there was the saying that the stronger side might not necessarily win. This was very possible. Then these black human figures must be very strong. Otherwise, if they could be easily destroyed, then what was the use of these black human figures? Ling Han counted carefully. There were a total of 232 black human figures. Then let's wait and see. Anyway, the answer will be revealed soon. They continued to advance, and it wasn't long before they arrived at the center of the canyon. This was a gigantic flat ground, and there were a total of 7 passageways. When Ling Han and the others appeared, there was also a large group of people charging out from the 2 passageways that separated them. It was Tian Qingyue and the others. Almost at the same time, 5 groups of black human figures also walked out from the remaining 5 passages. With a simple count, each group had exactly 237 people. Ling Han glanced at Tian Qingyue and the others, and the number of people was instantly reflected in his mind. 237. In other words, after entering the gorge, the passage with the most people would be the benchmark. The other passages that did not have this number would be filled by black human figures, and a balance would be achieved. Therefore, on Ling Han's side, there were 232 black human figures. Including the 5 of them, there were 237 of them. Tian Qingyue and the others had just discovered the existence of the black human figures, and they all revealed expressions of surprise. What was this? But at this moment, all the black figures moved. Some charged towards Tian Qingyue and the others, and some charged towards Ling Han and the others. In an instant, they changed from their previous numb state to a lively, murderous aura. It was as if even if there were thousands of soldiers and horses in front of them, they would not hesitate to charge over and slaughter them all. Hong, the first black figure, had already arrived. It stretched out its hand towards Ling Han, and its arm was covered with black lines, emitting a cold light that made one's heart palpitate. Ling Han humphed, and also shot out a punch, meeting the black figure's attack head-on. Chapter 2073. Peng Ling Han punched out, and the black humanoid was instantly scattered. But to his surprise, the black humanoid quickly reassembled behind him and then swung its long arm at his back. Were these black humanoids undying monsters? Ling Han leaped and dodged this attack. He made some calculations in his mind. The battle prowess of these black humanoids was equivalent to that of an Earth soul. Although they could not do anything to a super emperor like Tian Qingyue or an ordinary emperor like Dou Xiaojun, they were a huge threat to those whose battle prowess was below that of an Earth soul. Because they could not be destroyed. Tragic cries immediately sounded. Many people had underestimated their enemies and did not realize how terrifying these black humanoids were. They thought that they could destroy them with a single attack, but they were killed with a single attack. Ling Han immediately corrected his own method. An undying Earth soul was a huge threat even to a heavenly soul. Because he had just arrived, a few heavenly soul experts had been killed with a single attack. More importantly, there were a ridiculous number of these black humanoids. More than 1,000 of them had attacked together, and most of them were charging at Tian Qingyue and the others. But they had more people, so they naturally became a bigger target. Actually, the black humanoids were very fair. In terms of head count, the number of people attacking Ling Han and the others was the same as the number attacking Tian Qingyue and the others. Each person had to deal with about 6. But everyone on Ling Han's side was an elite. Even Bewitching Maiden Ro had the ability to defeat ghosts, and could barely match an Earth soul. As long as Ling Han took care of them a little, Bewitching Maiden Ro would be safe and sound. In that instant, more than a dozen people on Tian Qingyue's side died, and the number of deaths was still increasing. No wonder the elders said that the stronger side might not win. Really, the destructive power of these black humanoids was not simple. Even if Tian Qingyue and the others were attacked endlessly by these monsters, it was unknown whether they could last for 10 days. They did not know fatigue, did not know pain, and did not even know death. Wasn't this kind of opponent terrifying? Quick, form a defensive circle. Tian Qingyue and the other emperors all said, "This should be the best strategy at the moment. Some of you will rest, and some of you will be in charge of defense. We'll swap places after a while. We're going to fight for 10 days. Everyone listen to my commands. Otherwise, your lives will be yours." Those whose battle prowess was above that of an Earth soul attacked one after another, easily shattering the black humanoid figures. However, these humanoid figures would continuously reform themselves, and there was no way to destroy them, which posed a great threat to them. Fortunately, with Tian Qingyue and the other emperors supporting them, the death rate on their side immediately dropped. At least, no one died for the time being. Ji Wuming laughed coldly and charged forward. Peng, 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 one black figure after another was easily destroyed by him. He charged towards Tian Qingyue and the others like a hot knife through butter, and he did not hesitate to take out the broken emotion sword. With a sweep of the sword, Sword Chi soared into the sky. Tian Qingyue and Xiahou Tong met the attack at the same time, each sending out a punch. Bam Ji Wuming was instantly forced back. Although the heartless severing sword was invincible, what was the point of it not being able to hit someone? After all, in terms of battle prowess, Tian Qingyue and the other emperors were more powerful. This was determined by their cultivation. Ji Wuming did not care at all. As he moved forward, he repeatedly swung the heartless severing sword. Swish, swish, swish. Sword Chi swept out, slashing towards the black humanoid figures. His goal was very clear. He wanted to break up their group. He did not need to act as the true assassins. The black humanoid figures would naturally act on his behalf. Damn! Tian Qingyue roared angrily. If he and Xiahou Tong worked together, they could completely prevent Ji Wuming from using the power of the celestial sword. Before they could even get close, they would be sent flying. However, there were only 2 of them. How could they block Ji Wuming's chaotic attacks? It was completely unconstrained and incomparably casual. In order to dodge the sword Chi, the crowd could only scatter in all directions. This way, the defensive circle was immediately broken. The black humanoid figures surged forward, instantly tearing a few people to shreds. Blood sprayed everywhere, creating a bloody scene. "Don't scatter, "Don't scatter," some people hurriedly called out. Now that everyone had been scattered, they naturally immediately ran back and formed a new defensive circle. Ji Wuming grinned, and the heartless severing sword slashed again. It transformed into a sword chi that was 9 meters tall and 1.5 meters wide. Everyone gritted their teeth, determined not to run. Boom! The sword chi swept past, and blood instantly sprayed everywhere. At least a dozen or so people were directly crushed into pieces by the sword chi. This was a celestial tool. If it truly unleashed its might, even ascending origin tier great elites could only die on the spot. Now, it was only showing off its power, and that was incredibly frightening. How could a dividing soul tier cultivator withstand it head-on? Everyone was astonished. Should they hide or not? Both sides were calamities. Suppress him together. Zhu Huiyun rebuked, charging over first. They had purposely kicked Ling Han and Ji Wuming out of their alliance, and then used a method of provocation to make them sign contracts with different tribes. Wasn't this all so that they could crush their opponents with the advantage of numbers? In the end, though they had the advantage in numbers, it was completely useless. Under the suppression of the black humanoid figures, they could only passively take a beating. If this dragged on, they would definitely collapse. Thus, it was better to take advantage of the fact that they had the advantage in numbers now and join forces to deal with Ji Wuming, Ling Han, and the others. As long as these two died, Tian Qingyue and the others only had to protect themselves, and the final victory would still belong to them. Kill! The others were infuriated as well. They would either be killed by the black humanoid or be killed by Ji Wuming. So, they might as well go all out. If they could kill Ji Wuming, then their crisis would naturally be resolved. Their desire for life caused them to explode with astonishing battle prowess. They didn't hesitate to use their precious tools one after another. There was also the decree, which was the simplest precious tool. All of a sudden, the sky was filled with celestial light, its might astonishing. Meanwhile, the 4 super monarchs joined forces to attack Ji Wuming, leaving the black humanoid figures to the other monarchs to deal with. There were also a dozen or so heavenly soul tier elites assisting from the side, wanting to kill Ji Wuming as much as possible. "Have you all forgotten about me?" Ling Han roared, summoning his 9 heavens flame subsoul. With the divine demon sword in hand, he charged in powerfully. Peng, peng, peng. He was like a lion charging into a flock of sheep. Wherever he passed, piles of people would be sent flying. Some were whole, while others had been reduced to pieces. "We can't let them join forces." Zhu Huiyun screamed. Not only had the 4 monarchs experienced the might of Ling Han and Ji Wuming's combined might, they had also suffered. One had extremely thick defense, while the other had extremely firm offense. When the two of them joined forces, they could sweep away all those of the same cultivation level. Immediately, Tian Qingyue and Xiahou Tong each sent out 4 subsouls, which moved to intercept Ling Han. Using 8 subsouls to attack Ling Han, they were really taking Ling Han very seriously. Hee. Ling Han didn't hesitate and blasted out with a source power collision. Pung, pung, pung. The 8 subsouls were all sent flying. They weren't as strong as the main body. If one wanted to reach the main body's level, they had to inject a celestial king-level subsoul into their subsoul, such as the source power of heaven and earth. Otherwise, they had to be like Ji Wuming, who had been a celestial king in his previous life. If they couldn't do this, the subsoul couldn't possibly have the same battle prowess as the main body. Chapter 2074. Ling Han's source collision was an area of effect killing technique. It didn't matter how many people came, as everyone would suffer the same attack. Thus, if a single dividing soul couldn't withstand his attack, then the same would be true for 8. He charged over powerfully, his terrifying physique directly ignoring the attacks, and appeared beside Ji Wuming. "Same old rules." Ji Wuming grinned. Ling Han nodded. He had a good time working with Ji Wuming last time, and this time, they had to create a better result. No matter what, they had to kill a few of the 4 monarchs, right? Fight, fight, fight. The scene was chaotic. Ling Han and Ji Wuming were fighting the 4 monarchs, while the others were fighting the black humanoids. The black humanoids definitely wouldn't let them off just because Ling Han and the others were fighting, and also launched attacks at them. For Ling Han and Ji Wuming, it didn't affect them at all. Weren't they just Earth Soul level attacks? Even if Ling Han lay still and let them attack, they wouldn't be able to kill him even if they fought for an epic. And under his protection, Ji Wuming obviously didn't have to worry about defense, and only had to attack to his heart's content. But Tian Qingyue and the others couldn't. Even if the Earth Soul tier wasn't a match for them, they still had to take care of them. Whether it was a punch or a palm strike, they had to take care of them no matter what. This made them even more passive. It could be said that this was the straw that broke the camel's back. The four monarchs began to flee in disorder, and how could the other Heaven Soul tier cultivators block the might of a celestial tool? All of them died or fled. Meanwhile, the black humanoids carried out a merciless slaughter, reducing the number of people alive. "I'll burst your chrysanthemums." Hunyeo waved a metal rod in her hand and attacked the survivors. She was a cunning thief, and the opponent she had her eyes on was naturally someone she could deal with. She stretched out her rod, and a miserable scream was heard. A man was lifted up by her, and the other end of the iron rod sank into the man's buttocks, and dark red blood flowed out. "It's fun." The little girl waved her hand, and the iron staff swept out with a person. Peng, peng, peng. She activated her Kuan Peng bloodline, and the image of a huge Kuan Peng appeared behind her, giving her a terrifying boost of power. It should be known that even though she was not as monstrous as Ji Wuming, she still possessed a portion of the abilities of a ninth heaven celestial king. It was just that it was left in the form of a celestial king's brand in her sea of consciousness, and she needed to familiarize herself with it and use it. Therefore, this little girl's combat power was extremely terrifying, especially after she activated her Kuan Peng blood. Kill, kill, kill. Her ferocious nature erupted. Meanwhile, the Empress had a cold expression on her beautiful face. Her soul split appeared, and 18 doppelgangers appeared. The 20 Empresses were all extremely beautiful, but when they attacked, they were not soft-hearted at all. They started a massacre, and those below the Heavenly Soul stage were basically killed instantly by her. Only Bewitching Maiden Ro was much weaker. She could barely even deal with the black figures, so how could she have the time to deal with others? She could only use her gaze to cheer Hunyeo and the others on. This time, Ling Han and Ji Wuming began their pursuit. This was a sealed canyon. In less than 10 days, no one would be able to get out. Furthermore, this was the first time that everyone had entered here, so it was impossible that they had set up a trap. "Hunyeo Luanxing," Ling Han called out, and drew the two women into the Black Tower. Then, he swept his right hand towards the pitiful Bewitching Maiden Ro, and drew her into the Black Tower as well. If they were to begin their pursuit, they first had to deal with their worries. If they left the three women here, what would they do if they were taken as hostages? Ling Han and Ji Wuming used their movement techniques, and first pursued Xiahou Tong. "Do you think that someone that I, Ji Wuming, want to kill can escape?" Ji Wuming smirked coldly as he pursued. He drew out that small bow. Small universe Mi Bao, celestial tool. He did not parry the arrow and merely drew the bow. The Mi Bao immediately enlarged a good few times, and was as tall as a person. A streak of light appeared on the bow, and condensed into an arrow of light. "Go!" Ji Wuming shouted softly. "Xiao!" The arrow of light immediately shot out, shooting towards Xiahou Tong. If he could use the full might of a celestial tool, then even if Xiahou Tong's strength was 10,000 times stronger, he would only be insta-killed by this arrow. However, even Ji Wuming could not draw upon the might of a celestial tool at present. This arrow was purely the might of divine metal itself. Even so, this arrow of light was still incredibly frightening. It turned into a streak of light and shot towards Xiahou Tong. Too fast. Xiahou Tong roared in fury. He already had no time to dodge. He could either block it or take it head-on. He definitely did not dare to take it head-on. Though he did not turn around, he could already feel a chill that caused his whole body to tremble. If he was really struck by this arrow, he would definitely die on the spot. He hurriedly turned around and punched out. His fist was wrapped in a thick layer of light, and there were innumerable symbols shining densely. his fist met the arrow of light. Instantly, great Tao collided and light overflowed. One could clearly feel that this arrow of light was incredibly frightening. It continuously broke through the layer of light on Xiahou Tong's fist, as if that layer of defense could not even withstand a single blow from it. However, Xiahou Tong was a super monarch after all. If he did not have sufficient confidence, would he have punched out like this? Just as the arrow of light was about to hit his fist, the arrow suddenly turned into specks of light and disappeared. To be able to dissipate the attack of a celestial tool, even if it was not an awakened celestial tool, Xiahou Tong's strength was indeed astonishing. However, this was useless. Ji Wuming calmly drew his bow again. Xiao, another arrow of light shot out. Xiahou Tong, do you block it or not? You can only block it. But so what if you block this arrow? Ji Wuming just has to draw his bow again. Arrow after arrow, Ji Wuming's attacks were unending, and Ling Han had already caught up. Must you be so ruthless? Xiahou Tong called out harshly. Ling Han could not help but laugh and said, "It seems like you are the ones who want to kill us, right? Why are you crying injustice now? You look down on me too much." Xiahou Tong's face was filled with killing intent. Boom, his entire body suddenly burst forth with a powerful aura, and the image of a ferocious beast soared out of his body. This ferocious beast had 7 great Tao symbols on its body, but each one was badly damaged. Even so, it still exuded an ancient and dignified aura, as if it was an origin beast from the primordial era. This ferocious beast was shaped like a deer, and it had horns on its head. Its entire body was covered in scales, and it had a bull's tail. North Star? Ji Wuming revealed a look of shock. When Ling Han heard this, he immediately let out a no. The North Star was an ancient origin beast, and it was also one of the most powerful. Xiahou Tong possessed the North Star bloodline, and now that he had fully activated it, it was no wonder that his aura had suddenly soared. However, activating it like this would definitely require him to pay a huge price. Otherwise, he could have used it earlier. Most likely, like the Fire Divine Fetus, he could only activate it for a short period of time, and after that he would wither. That's right. My ancestor is an ancient origin beast, North Star, Xiahou Tong said proudly. Black scales appeared on the parts of his body that were exposed, including his face, neck, and hands. At this moment, Xiahou Tong did not look like a human at all. Instead, he looked like a true ancient immortal beast. Unfortunately, you don't know that the North Star was slaughtered by me, Ji Wuming said indifferently. Chapter 2076. Ling Han also strode forward, standing shoulder to shoulder with Ji Wuming. Today is the day the two of you die. Zhu Huiyun opened her mouth and punched out, turning one of the black humanoids into dust. Although the black humanoids could not be killed, the more they were destroyed, the longer it would take for them to reform. Of course, this would take at most a breath of time. The black humanoids were rapidly reforming, and Ling Han and Ji Wuming were closing in. Swish, swish. At this moment, 2 figures suddenly charged out from behind the boulder, their target Ji Wuming. At the same time, Zhu Huiyun also charged out, her sword pointed at Ji Wuming. The 2 people who had charged out from behind the boulder were Yu Huaqing and Tian Qingyue. As expected, this was a trap. The 2 super emperors had used some unknown method to conceal their auras, making it so that divine sense was unable to reach them. It was as if they did not exist. At this moment, they were ruthlessly attacking Ji Wuming, whose defense was clearly on the weaker side. This was a very correct strategy. As long as they killed Ji Wuming first, Ling Han's defense would be useless. Ling Han humphed and moved to the side to block. "I've been waiting for you." Tian Qingyue suddenly grinned and waved his right hand, throwing out a jade bottle. It instantly grew dozens of times larger and fell down on Ling Han's head. Bang! The jade bottle fell, and Ling Han also disappeared. Kill! Tian Qingyue and the other 2 attacked Ji Wuming at the same time, each of them using their full power. "Oh, Su Lan's purified bottle?" Ji Wuming glanced at the jade bottle and said indifferently. He moved his feet, not fighting the 3 head-on. After all, they were 3 super emperors. Even he would die if he fought them head-on. Tian Qingyue and the other two had set up a trap. Although their target was still Ji Wuming, Ling Han was their first target. They had used a treasure to temporarily drive him out of the battle. Oh, it's not the purified bottle. It's just an imitation and can only be used once. Ji Wuming nodded. Although he was surrounded by 3 emperors, he didn't feel any fear. He'd truly seen scenes like this many times. When he was dealing with the tide of darkness, he'd even suffered the joint attacks of many experts that were equivalent to 9th Heaven Immortal Kings, but they were still crushed by him in the end. He dealt with every move that came his way and moved his feet. He seemed to be at ease under the siege of the 3 emperors. Tian Qinyu and the other 2 were filled with shock, not because Ji Wuming recognized that this treasure was a replica of the purified treasure vase, but because he directly called out Void Billow Immortal King's title. The title of the Celestial King was not something that a dividing soul could directly call out. This is treason. No matter how stunning or arrogant a prodigy was, they still had to be respectful when the Immortal King's name was mentioned. You actually dare to call an Immortal King by his name? How audacious, Tian Qingyue said coldly. Ji Wuming didn't care. In reality, most of the Immortal Kings were his juniors. If they knew his true identity, all of them would have to greet him respectfully. There were 9 heavens in the Celestial King realm, and every step was like reaching the heavens. In front of a 9th Heaven Immortal King, even an 8th Heaven Immortal King was a junior. Void Billow Immortal King was only an 8th Heaven Immortal King. In Ji Wuming's eyes, he wasn't even worth mentioning. Stop talking nonsense with him. He's just trying to stall for time, Yu Huaqing said coldly. That's right, kill. The 3 of them unleashed their ultimate moves together, wanting to kill Ji Wuming as soon as possible. Because the purified treasure vase was only an imitation, it couldn't possibly trap Ling Han for too long. Ji Wuming was still calm. His footsteps were extremely strange, but his entire person seemed to have vanished from space. Any attack that was thrown at him would directly pass through, unable to cause any damage. Laws of space. The 3 emperors exclaimed, their eyes filled with shock. The laws of space were above the 5 elemental laws, and it wasn't easy to cultivate them. That was because one had to obtain herbs like the void grass in order to comprehend them. If one didn't even comprehend something, how could one obtain the secrets of the laws of space? But Ji Wuming had just relied on his footsteps to dodge all their attacks. This meant that his grasp of the laws of space had reached an extremely high level. How had he cultivated it? Such luck really made one's eyes turn red with jealousy. However, the 3 emperors didn't give up. Instead, they increased the power of their attacks. Although the laws of space were indeed above the 5 elemental laws, that depended on the strength of the laws on both sides. It was impossible for 100% of the power of wood to be able to match up to 10% of the power of space. Right now, as long as they increased the power of their attacks, they would naturally be able to break through Ji Wuming's laws of space. As expected, when the 3 emperors' attacks increased to a certain level, Ji Wuming's footsteps also became chaotic. That was because the laws of space had been broken. Ji Wuming didn't care at all. He spread out his hands, one connecting to the past, the other controlling the future. His body seemed to be in the past, but also seemed to be in the future. Laws of time. Tian Qingyue and the others were even more shocked. It was one thing for him to be proficient in the laws of space, but how could he be so proficient in the laws of time? Whether it was space or time, they weren't things that a martial artist could cultivate just because they wanted to. They had to obtain the corresponding immortal herbs. And to reach Ji Wuming's level, the number of immortal herbs needed was definitely an astonishing number. It was guaranteed that most immortal kings would only be able to draw in a cold breath. Not only did one need sufficient strength, but one also needed to live long enough. Otherwise, even 9th Heaven Immortal Kings wouldn't be able to do anything. Just where did this person come from? Bang! Right at this moment, a palm print suddenly appeared on the clear treasure vase. Then, bang bang, the palm print increased in number and depth. Quick! That person is about to break the treasure and come out. At most 10 moves. We have to kill this person. Everyone, use your ultimate moves. Tian Qingyue and the others were all very anxious. Ling Han was about to appear, and they had to kill Ji Wuming as soon as possible. Otherwise, the situation would instantly reverse, and they would no longer have the slightest advantage or chance of victory. A clear moon stands proudly over the ages. Tian Qingyue was the first to attack. A bright moon appeared behind him, clear and cold like water. There was a tattered ancient character on the moon, and it immediately lit up, causing the moonlight to become even more resplendent. When the moonlight shone on Ji Wuming's body, his figure immediately froze, and he could no longer move. Violet Tip Immortal Sword. Zhu Huiyun also unleashed her ultimate move. She pulled out a violet immortal sword from the top of her head. This wasn't a true immortal tool, but rather a sword formed from her divine soul. A split soul didn't have to take human form. It could also take the form of various weapons, but this was extremely rare. A hint of sharpness flashed in her eyes. After this attack, she would self-detonate her soul, instantly increasing her battle prowess by 10 times or even 100 times, forming a terrifying destructive power. Finally, Yu Huaqing patted his chest. Hong, a pair of wings unfurled behind his back, and the runes lit up, raising his battle prowess to an astonishing height. Ji Wuming chuckled and said, Ma Jiyi, myriad waves of Buddha Luo. He chanted the name of Buddha, and the character for swastika appeared on his forehead. Boundless golden light shone down, enveloping his body. The attacks of the three monarchs were all blocked by the golden light. Ji Wuming was like a golden Buddha, undying and indestructible. Chapter 2077. They'd used all their strength and even used their trump cards, which could increase their battle prowess tenfold. All of them had given their all and had even unleashed their trump cards. Those trump cards could increase their battle prowess by 10 times. Golden Buddha. That's the Nine Lanterns Buddha's unique secret technique. The three monarchs looked at Ji Wuming in shock and said in unison, "You're a Buddhist successor." The Nine Lanterns Buddha was a legendary figure, an invincible celestial king. He'd founded the Buddhist sect, and its purpose was to guide people to do good. Legend had it that this celestial king had a merciful heart, but he'd also become a demon in a moment of rage. Even ninth heaven celestial kings had been slaughtered by him. Thus, the Buddhist sect was an incredibly powerful sect, and ranked at the top even among ninth heaven celestial king factions. If Ji Wuming was from the Buddhist sect, then his identity was a bit shocking. If anyone dared to kill him, wouldn't the Buddhist sect act? It was said that the Nine Lanterns Buddha had disappeared long ago, but who would believe that such a powerful celestial king had fallen? It was said that he was in seclusion, and if he reappeared in the celestial realm, his battle prowess would be even greater. Putting aside the Nine Lanterns Buddha, 2 of his 3 disciples had become ninth heaven celestial kings, and 1 was eighth heaven celestial king. Just these 3 alone were enough to scare people to death. Ji Wuming revealed a strange smile. A Buddhist successor? The entire Buddhist sect had been founded by him, but he'd been fighting against the tide of darkness at the borders for too long, and his personality had changed drastically. That was why he'd abandoned his near-invincible body, put down his obsession with delivering all living beings from suffering, and reincarnated. There was no need to tell the juniors about this. So what if he's a Buddhist successor? Kill him, Tian Qingyue said coldly. At this point, it was either you die or I die. Moreover, after entering the historical site, one had to be responsible for their own life and death. This had always been the tradition. No matter how powerful the Buddhist sect was, it still had to be reasonable, right? Zhu Huiyun and Yu Huaqing both had cold expressions. Since they were standing on the opposite side, it was better for him to die than for them to die. Ji Wuming continued to chant, and the swastika above his head shone even more brilliantly. Layers of golden light spread out, as if it were made of glazed gold. Peng, peng, peng. All attacks were useless. They could not break through this layer of defense. The 3 emperors were extremely anxious. Time passed very quickly, but they had already pushed their attacks to the limits, yet they were still unable to break through Ji Wuming's defenses. They had a feeling that they were facing Ling Han. No matter how hard you try, it's all in vain. Clang! Just at this moment, a loud noise was heard, and a large hole was smashed open in the bottle. Ling Han's figure appeared, and with a single step he walked out. I didn't miss anything, did I? He laughed. Just right, Ji Wuming said indifferently as he put away his invulnerable golden body. In the future he and Ling Han would become rivals, so he would not let Ling Han know some of his trump cards. This glazed golden body was the ultimate move that he had just cultivated. When he activated it with all his might, he would have an indestructible golden body that was comparable to Ling Han's physique. The difference was that Ling Han's physique existed forever and did not need to be actively circulated. There was no helping it. This was a technique created by an Empyrean. How could it not be amazing? Tian Qingyue and the others had ugly expressions. They had thought that as long as they could isolate Ling Han, they would have a chance to kill Ji Wuming. But when they really put it into practice, they realized that as long as Ji Wuming focused on defense, he was not inferior to Ling Han at all. This was too despairing. Now it's your turn. Ji Wuming grinned. The swastika on his forehead was glowing like a Buddha, but the emotionless severing sword in his hand was as merciless as a demon king. He brazenly attacked, and with a sweep of his sword, the clouds split apart. Ling Han followed. He did not need to attack, he only needed to be responsible for defense. The three monarchs didn't flee this time. This place had limited space. Instead of being separated and defeated one by one, it was better to gather together and fight. As long as they could last for 10 days, they would be able to see the moon after the clouds had dispersed. 5 emperors were fighting. Even though Ling Han and Ji Wuming were slightly weaker in battle, they could suppress Tian Qingyue and the others. This scene was very strange. And the black humanoids were still joining in the fun. Even though they were only at the Earth Soul level, because of their undying characteristics, they caused more and more trouble for Tian Qingyue and the others. More importantly, the number of black humanoids was still increasing. What did this mean? The outsiders that entered were massacred in large numbers. Only then would there be more black humanoids killing their way here. Tian Qingyue and the others gritted their teeth and persevered. Their only hope of survival was to last for 10 days, but it was extremely difficult now. 1 day, 3 days, 7 days, the 3 of them were indeed peak-level emperors. Under their all-out defense, they managed to last for 7 days without collapsing. But they were almost at their limits. Their bodies were riddled with injuries, which greatly affected their battle strength. If not for their incomparably strong willpower, anyone else would have definitely lost their battle strength after suffering such heavy injuries. Yu Huaqing was the first to scream. He was killed by Ji Wuming's sword. Tian Qingyue and Zhu Huiyun had ugly expressions. It was as if they had already seen their end. But there was no way out. They could only fight. Another half a day later, Tian Qingyue also screamed as he was killed by Ji Wuming's little universal Mi Bao. Only Zhu Huiyun was left. Ling Han was not soft-hearted. Ji Wuming did not know what soft-heartedness was. The 2 emperors worked together. In just less than half a day, Zhu Huiyun's beautiful head was also cut off. She died on the spot. Ji Wuming used his cultivation technique and devoured the corpses of the 3 emperors. Ling Han took their spatial rings. There was no reason for him not to take the spoils of war. They returned to the center of the canyon. There were only 4 survivors, including Du Xiaojun and Long Budian. Killing intent flashed in Ji Wuming's eyes. He was about to draw his bow and shoot. Ling Han pressed his hand down. Enough, we have already won. Ji Wuming glared at Ling Han with killing intent in his eyes. It was as if he wanted to transfer his killing intent to Ling Han. After a while, he retracted his gaze. With a wave of his hand, he turned around and left. Thank you, Brother Ling. Du Xiaojun said loudly in the distance. Now that he was surrounded by 200 black figures, he was in imminent danger. If Ji Wuming attacked again, he would definitely die. Ling Han nodded and released the Empress and the others from the Black Tower. Now, Du Xiaojun, Long Budian, and the others naturally did not dare to think that they could win. They would be satisfied as long as they could survive this setback. Now that they had all gathered together, over 1,000 black figures surrounded them and attacked them. Of course, over 200 of them were on Ling Han's side, so they wouldn't attack them. However, Du Xiaojun and the others were all enemies. Ling Han had helped the 4 of them out of danger time and time again, causing them to feel incredibly grateful towards him. This was especially so for Long Badian. He had thought that his battle prowess was above Ling Han's, but now he realized that Ling Han had not used his full strength when they had fought. Otherwise, it was possible that he would have been killed by Ling Han within 100 moves. Another 3 days passed, and the battle between the tribes finally came to an end. A dazzling bead suddenly descended from the sky. It was incredibly dazzling. Reading on a phone was even more refreshing. Chapter 2078. Dragon Pearl. In the instant that this pearl appeared, all the black figures disappeared, signifying the end of this tribal war. On the hands of Ling Han, the Empress, and the others, a mark started to glow, and it resonated with the Dragon Pearl. They were the victors this time, so only they could collect the Dragon Pearl. Otherwise, Du Xiaojun and the others could not touch it at all. Additionally, another pillar of light descended from the sky, landing in the center of the valley like a passageway. Ji Wuming walked over first, and after entering the pillar of light, he disappeared. This was the passageway to leave. This valley had always been a place where one could only enter and not leave. Du Xiaojun and the others all thanked Ling Han again, and then entered the pillar of light, disappearing from sight. Ji Wuming would not collect the Dragon Pearl, so Ling Han could only do it himself. He picked up the Dragon Pearl, and sensed it slightly, but did not discover anything special about this Dragon Pearl at all. It was as ordinary as a rock, aside from the fact that it could glow. At first, he wanted to study it more, but that pillar of light was slowly dimming. Obviously, the passageway to leave was about to close, so he could only quickly walk over and leave with the 3 women. He felt his body shake, and he had already appeared near the summit. The old monk Na Su was waiting there, his face full of smiles. What a monk, he was grinning so widely that he could not close his mouth. When he arrived in the valley and saw the mark that represented the Bronze tribe light up, he realized that their tribe had actually won this tribal war, and hurriedly ran over to the summit. He really had not thought that a mere 5 people could actually turn the tide of the battle. Fortunately, I did not disappoint you. Ling Han waved the Dragon Pearl in his hand, but did not hand it over. The old monk Na Su understood, and with a flick of his finger, a spatial ring shot towards Ling Han. Ling Han caught it, scanned it with his divine sense, and revealed a satisfied smile. There was a total of 50 portions of Sky Dragon Bone Powder, and each portion could double the benefits obtained from the 100 Dragons Empowerment, but the limit was only 10, and any more would be ineffective. Ling Han also tossed the Dragon Pearl to the old monk. Na Su narrowed his eyes and smiled. He was just about to say something when his whole person disappeared. Ling Han could sense that there was some kind of resonance between the Dragon Ball and the old monk. This should be the effect of the bloodline. Ji Wuming, Du Xiaojun, and the others were all here. There had been more than 200 people who had entered the Divine Dragon Mountain, but now there were only 9 left. Ling Han threw 10 portions of Heavenly Dragon Bone Powder to Ji Wuming. This caused Du Xiaojun and the others to feel envious, but none of them dared to have any disloyal thoughts. What a joke, their current lives were all picked up by luck. Let's go. There's only one last stage left, and that's the 100 Dragons Empowerment. They continued up the mountain and soon arrived at the top of the mountain. There was a huge platform there, and in the middle of the platform was a stone seat. It was also very big, enough for 4 or 5 people to sit on it. One day later, whoever is able to sit on the throne will be able to obtain 99% of the benefits of the 100 Dragons Empowerment, while the people on the platform will only be able to obtain 1% of the benefits, Du Xiaojun said. Ji Wuming didn't stop and directly walked into the area of the platform. Instantly, the entire platform lit up. The countdown had begun. Ling Han, let's fight again. Ji Wuming's eyes shone brightly. Right now, among those at the same cultivation level as him, Ling Han could barely be considered as an opponent. But one had to know that he hadn't used his split soul, so Ling Han could only just barely be a match for him. He needed a true opponent. The path to supremacy had never been walked by a single person. Rather, he had to kill his way out of a myriad of geniuses. In the past, he had a few competitors who were evenly matched, and they encouraged each other. In the end, he was the one who killed his way out and became a ninth heaven celestial king. If it weren't for these competitors, he might not have been able to reach the height of the ninth heaven. So if he wanted to climb to the peak of martial art, a good opponent was even better than immortal medicines and cultivation techniques. All right. Ling Han was also burning with battle intent. He leaped onto the platform and immediately attacked. The two strongest monarch tiers didn't warm up at all, and directly entered their strongest battle state. Fists, palms, legs, swords, and even a strand of hair could be used as a powerful weapon. It was incredibly terrifying. Although Dou Xiaojun and the others knew how powerful Ling Han and Ji Wuming were, they had never been so close and focused on their battle. They couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. These two people were too powerful, and had completely surpassed the limits of the dividing soul tier. Young Master Dou, do you think their battle prowess can rival an immortal palace tier elite after they advance to the heavenly soul tier? Long Budian asked curiously. Dou Xiaojun thought for a moment, and a look of hesitation appeared on his face. Impossible! Someone beside him immediately shook his head. This was the third survivor among the four, and his name was Purslin. He was very certain. The immortal palace tier has cultivated a secret realm of the human body, and their battle prowess is unimaginably terrifying. Even if Ling Han and Ji Wuming both reached the heavenly soul tier and joined forces, they still wouldn't be a match for a first secret elite. The fourth survivor, Fan Yi, also nodded. Indeed, the gap between the immortal palace tier and the dividing soul tier is too large. Even an ordinary first secret elite can suppress any dividing soul tier monarch tier. Dou Xiaojun slowly said, but don't forget that a fifth severance can rival a dividing soul tier. Unfortunately, the dividing soul tier only has 4 minor tiers, heaven, earth, yin, and yang, and doesn't have a fifth tier. Thus, no matter how talented you are, you will still be limited by the iron law of martial art. This is the rule of heaven and earth, Purslin said with absolute certainty. Perhaps these two will create a miracle, Dou Xiaojun said. Haha, then do you want to make a bet? Fan Yi said with a laugh. What bet? Dou Xiaojun wasn't afraid. The loser has to promise to do something for the winner, no matter what it is, Purslin said. Dou Xiaojun didn't nod or shake his head. Instead, he looked at Fan Yi and asked, what does Brother Fan say? I'll bet. Fan Yi nodded firmly. No one paid any attention to Long Budian. A mere emperor tier was nothing in front of a monarch tier. The two of you are definitely going to lose, Hu Niu interrupted. Niu's Ling Han is the strongest. Her expression was filled with pride. Fan Yi and Purslin both smiled reservedly. Though they were incredibly grateful to Ling Han, as monarch tiers, they naturally had their own opinions. They definitely wouldn't let their own wishes go against their own will. If that was the case, their path of advancement in martial art would be pretty much severed. A dividing soul tier could rival an immortal palace tier? What kind of joke was this? They were the ones who were going to win. In the arena, Ling Han and Ji Wuming were battling fiercely. However, their goal wasn't to kill the other, but rather to force the other off the throne. They both knew that they couldn't defeat the other with their current strength. Thus, monopolizing the throne and enjoying the benefits of the 100 Dragons imbuement was the way to go. Battle, battle, battle. These two strongest monarch tiers were doing their best, erupting with their strongest battle prowess. They wanted to force the other off the throne. Dou Xiaojun, the Empress, and the others also entered the arena. They didn't have the right to participate in this kind of battle, and could only stand to the side. In any case, there was only 1% of the benefits, so they couldn't be bothered to continue fighting. They only waited quietly. Time passed quietly, and a day passed very quickly. Meanwhile, Ling Han and Ji Wuming were still battling fiercely on the throne. Neither of them had retreated a single step. Chapter 2080. Brother Fu. Ling Han looked at the dumbstruck Fu Yu. Fu Yu's body was stiff, and he didn't react no matter how Ling Han waved his hand in front of him. After a while, Fu Yu suddenly jumped up as if his tail had been stepped on. He jumped 3 feet high, and then suddenly grabbed the person who had spoken before. Are you sure his name is Ling Han? The person was given a fright, but he was only at the 3rd severance, so he naturally couldn't resist Fu Yu's power. He hurriedly said in a trembling voice, "Young master, are you talking about the 2 fierce people that killed Tian Qingyue?" Nonsense. The person was sprayed with saliva, but didn't even dare to wipe it. Yes, that person is called Ling Han. Legend has it that he is 7 meters tall, and his arms are as long as his knees. He's as big as a rock, and he's incredibly ferocious. Ling Han was instantly astonished. So be it if he was 7 meters tall, but what the hell was that about being as big as a rock? Ha! Hunyo laughed and said, "Ling Han, are you 7 meters tall? Your arms aren't very long either." Even the Empress couldn't help but laugh. This rumor was too ridiculous. Fu Yu released the person and asked Ling Han, "Brother Ling, did you really do it?" "I told you, but you didn't believe me," Ling Han said with a smile. "My God!" Fu Yu clutched his head. "You're only at the Yang Soul level." "So what? So what? When you reach the Heaven Soul tier, won't you even be able to slaughter Immortal Palace tier?" Fu Yu shouted. He had thought that the fierce person that killed Tian Qingyue and the others would definitely be at the Heaven Soul tier, but even more freakish than the 4 of them. He had never thought that his imagination was completely insufficient. This kind of freak was actually only at the Yang Soul level. How would I know? Ling Han shook his head. The gap between Dividing Soul and Immortal Palace tier was too big, so big that it was even bigger than the gap between Severing Mundane tier and Dividing Soul tier. Monarch tiers at the Severing Mundane tier could match Yang Souls, but no Heaven Soul could possibly be a match for First Secret Elites. However, if he could possess 9 subsouls and increase his cultivation level above the Heavenly Soul stage another 5 times, would he be able to close the gap between him and the Immortal Palace stage? They could only wait and see. As the 5 of them spoke, they went up to the 2nd floor together, leaving behind the 2 who had their mouths wide open as if they were in a daze. That young man just now was the fierce Ling Han who slaughtered Tian Qingyue. Once they were in the private room on the 2nd floor, Fu Yu couldn't wait to ask about the battle between Ling Han and Tian Qingyue. Ling Han had no choice but to compress it and tell this curious baby. He never liked to brag about himself, so he played it down. Even so, Fu Yu couldn't help but gasp when he heard it. He was so excited that he even jumped and danced. "Brother Ling, you are really awesome." He gave a big thumbs up and did not hold back his admiration. That's right, the grand meeting of alchemy is about to begin soon. It is said that not only will there be many great alchemists who have been famous for many years, there will also be many famous members of the younger generation. Brother Ling, it will be extremely difficult for you to squeeze into the top 3. Come, let me give you a look. Fu Yu began to count on his fingers. Let's talk about the older generation first. This time, there is Alchemist Ri Yang. He was already a 3-star alchemist several tens of millions of years ago. It is said that he has also reached the 4th refinement in spirit refinement, and there is hope for him to become a grandmaster. There are really too many geniuses among the younger generation. Wu Zixu from Luoyun City is a peerless genius. He became a 3-star alchemist before he was 10 million years old, and not long ago he even reached the 4th refinement. Though not much time has passed, such a genius, coupled with the time cultivation chamber, could reach the 5th refinement at any time. Though Xie Yuezhang from Hundred Flowers City is not as stunning as Wu Zixu, his progress is incredibly stable. He spent a whole billion years to become a 1-star alchemist. At that time, no one took him seriously, but another billion years later, he became a 2-star alchemist, and another billion years later he advanced to become a 3-star alchemist. This time, it just so happens to be another billion years after he became a 3-star alchemist. Everyone is guessing that it is extremely likely that he has become a 4-star alchemist. Pan Luoling from Chasing Sun City is a woman as beautiful as a goddess. It is said that she has obtained the memories of an ancient grandmaster, and her alchemy skills have improved by leaps and bounds. This time, she will definitely become a strong opponent for Brother Ling. That's not right. She should have already decided on a spot. Ling Han was slightly puzzled and said, "The competition hasn't started yet, so what makes you say that?" Hee, that's because you don't know. This time, among the alchemists that the ancient pill tower has sent out, there is one who is the grandson of Elder Yuan. His name is Yuan Tongguang. A few days ago, I went to see him and accompanied Pan Luoling, trying to curry favor with her. Say, with the support of an elder's grandson, it won't be easy for Pan Luoling to obtain a spot, Fu Yu said. Ling Han couldn't help but laugh. You are too sinister. If you don't believe me, then just wait and see. Fu Yu shook his head. However, Brother Ling, you killed Tian Qingyue and the others, which is a huge hole. The force behind them definitely won't let you off easily. Ling Han cracked a smile. The bigger the commotion, the better. Only when the commotion was big could Lu Herong possibly hear about them and rush over to take them away. Otherwise, who knew what kind of situation would occur on this trip to the Rock Palace? Fu Yu couldn't help but be speechless. He only felt that Ling Han was too daring. He had already caused such a huge commotion, yet he was still so carefree. Unlike the 100 Dragons' secret realm, the alchemy competition could be watched the entire time. Thus, it also became a hot topic of gambling in the city, causing many people to place their bets and pick out the people who were most likely to become the top 3. As expected, the payout rates were known. Alchemist Ri Yang, Wu Zixu, Xie Yuezhang, and Pan Luoling's payout rates were only around 2. Compared to some people's payout rates of 1 to 40, the difference was shocking. Ling Han naturally belonged to the category of people who were not valued. His payout rate was 1 to 10. It wasn't ridiculously high because when he registered, he had to first fill in his current alchemy abilities. Thus, a 3-star alchemist and 4th refinement could not possibly make his payout too high. Additionally, there were a few new people who were valued. Their payout rates were relatively low. Although they were not as high as Wu Zixu and the others, they still reached the level of 1 to 3 and 1 to 4, showing that they were still very well regarded. Of course, there would always be a dark horse appearing in every alchemy competition. For example, the alchemy genius Feng Tianyun had appeared last time. Previously, no one had treated him well, but in the end he advanced triumphantly and bravely took first place. What's the reward for first place this time? Ling Han asked. Feng Yu opened his mouth, but could not say a word. This competition hadn't started yet, and he had just been told that there were many geniuses this time, and any one of them had the ability to become the champion. Yet, he actually didn't take it to heart? He shook his head and said, the reward for first place is said to be a map that leads to an ancient secret realm. It's extremely possible that there's a great medicine that's 100 billion years old inside. 100 billion years old medicine? This was very shocking. Usually, celestial medicines could be considered mature when they reached the level of 10 billion years old and could be used as medicine. 100 billion years old medicine was not as simple as 10 identical celestial medicines. Its value would increase by 100 times or even 1,000 times. Ling Han's heart thumped with excitement. Chapter 2081. The matter of Tian Qingyue and the other super monarchs being killed was still brewing, but because the celestial realm was too big, these forces would not make any immediate reaction. However, if one calculated the time, perhaps the results would be revealed after the alchemy competition. The alchemy competition was right after the 100 Dragons' secret realm, so the competition was scheduled for 10 days later. Ling Han began a small seclusion. Comprehending under the reincarnation tree, a mere 10 days could become a long time. In alchemy, Ling Han had reached a bottleneck. He could not open the door to becoming a 4-star alchemist, and in spirit refinement, he was temporarily stuck at 4th refinement, always a little bit away from 5th refinement. Though 10 days could not change anything, last-minute sharpening was always good. Very quickly, 10 days passed, and it was the day of the alchemy competition. There were millions of alchemists participating in the competition. Putting aside those who overestimated themselves, there were also many 3-star alchemists. All of them hoped to enter the ancient pill tower and open the door to becoming a 4-star alchemist. However, there were a few exceptions. They were not worried at all that they could not become a 4-star alchemist. Instead, they wanted to use this opportunity to open the door as soon as possible. For example, Ling Han, Wu Zixu, and other prodigies. Of course, the reward was also an important reason. Because there were too many people, it was naturally impossible for so many people to concoct alchemical pills at the same time. The first step was herb identification. This stage could eliminate about 90% of the people. It was not that herb identification was difficult, but only the 10% with the best results would be selected. How was the test going to be conducted? It was simple. There was a stone of alchemy in 100 Dragons City. This was forged by a great alchemy elite. After an alchemist injected their divine sense into it, they would enter an illusory world. Then, medicinal plants would appear for the alchemist to identify. The test was divided into many stages. The more stages one passed, the better the result would be. The stone of alchemy was very large. It was about 300 meters tall, and its diameter was about 150 meters. When someone finished the test, their result would appear on the stone, and those who could squeeze into the top 10 in the history of alchemy would forever be left on the stone pillar. There were only 10 people. Just think about it, generation after generation, how many people participated in this test? The later one was, the harder it was to leave their name on the stone. This was because this was the same as having to fight against all the previous geniuses of the Tao of alchemy. Hey, have Wu Zixu and Xie Yuezhang started their test? Someone asked. No. Someone beside him shook his head. Hurry, someone passed the 7th trial. Another person cried out in alarm while pointing at the medicine Tao stone. Ling Han also lifted his head and saw that there were 7 glowing halos on the alchemy stone, but they were quickly extinguished. This should be the current best result. It should be. I wonder which genius it is. Everyone looked around, but there were at least 100 people around the Tao alchemy stone with their hands placed on it. All of them were as still as a rock. How could they know who passed the 7th trial? After a while, a person stood up and laughed loudly, looking extremely pleased with himself. Brother Gon, how are our results? Someone asked from the side. Ha, very good, laughed that person. Could it be that Brother Gon is the person who passed the 7th trial? The first person asked. What? Brother Gon's smile immediately froze. He only passed the 4th trial, but this was already his best result, so he laughed out loud with great satisfaction. Passing the 7th trial? What a joke! Even if he spent billions of years studying alchemy, he still wouldn't be able to pass the 7th trial. This wasn't only determined by effort, but also by talent. Haha! Immediately, the people nearby burst out in laughter. So it turned out that this guy had made a mistake. Brother Gon had an awkward expression and wished that there was a hole in the ground for him to crawl into. Another person came over. This was someone from the Gudon Tower. Although he was only an apprentice, because of the Gudon Tower's reputation, no one dared to be disrespectful and quickly made way for him. This person arrived next to Brother Gon and said, "Your result is the 4th trial. Your name is Gon Ping, correct?" Brother Gon weakly replied, "Very well." The apprentice wrote down a few things on a piece of paper before turning around to leave. At this time, another person finished their trial. The apprentice walked back and forth to record everyone's results. This couldn't be faked since the alchemy stone would imprint the characteristics of each person's divine intents. At that time, they only needed to compare the results. Once someone was found to be cheating, they would be severely punished by the Gudon Tower. Thus, very few people dared to do this. Suddenly, an uproar came from the distance, followed by a piece of news. Just now, when someone was registering their results, it showed that they had passed the 7th trial. Lin Yongcheng. That person's name is Lin Yongcheng. This kind of result should be the current first place. Even in the previous trials, he would still be in the top 10. Who is this person? How come I've never heard of him before? He should be the dark horse this time. Everyone discussed animatedly, all shocked by this new alchemy genius that popped out. Not long after, a young man walked out in large strides. The surrounding people all stared at him with reverent gazes as if he was some great character. "That's Lin Yongcheng," someone exclaimed in a low voice. Lin Yongcheng's expression was cold. As he walked, there was not a trace of a smile on his face, appearing extremely arrogant. He walked past with his head held high and chest puffed out, not even sparing a glance at anyone. Does anyone know where he came from? Everyone shook their heads, their faces filled with confusion. However, this guy is too arrogant, making people unhappy. Very unhappy. "Xie Yuezhang is here," someone suddenly called out, pointing in the direction of the entrance. Ling Han also followed the gazes of the others. That was a man with a medium build. His appearance was very scholarly, and he had a full head of black hair. Though he was not very tall, he naturally had an imposing aura that made others revere him. This was Xie Yuezhang, a 3-star alchemist with the level of 4th refinement. He was only one step away from becoming a 4-star alchemist. Xie Yuezhang didn't put on any airs. As he walked, he nodded repeatedly at those who greeted him, and then brushed past Lin Yongcheng. One person was arrogant, and the other was humble, forming a strong contrast. Lin Yongcheng paused slightly, and glanced at Xie Yuezhang out of the corner of his eye. He didn't say anything, but the disdain in his eyes couldn't be more obvious. Meanwhile, Xie Yuezhang didn't care at all, as if he didn't even notice this person. Instead, he walked to the alchemy stone with a smile, found an empty spot, and pressed his hand on it. Can Xie Yuezhang pass all 7 stages? Absolutely. He's the one with the highest chance of advancing to 4-star alchemist, so how could he lose to Lin Yongcheng? That's not necessarily true. Lin Yongcheng is a dark horse that's practically shining. As the crowd discussed, a ring of light on the alchemy stone lit up, but after a short while, 2 rings of light lit up at the same time. This should be Xie Yuezhang, right? As expected of an alchemy genius, he only used an hour to pass 2 stages. 4 hours later, 3 rings of light lit up at the same time. Chapter 2082. Xie Yuezhang's path was like a hot knife through butter. In just one day he had passed 5 trials in a row. However, it took him half a day to pass the 6th trial, and it took a long time for all 7 halos to light up at the same time. This showed how difficult it was to pass the 7th trial, as well as how extraordinary Lin Yongcheng's Tao of Alchemy was. Almost 3 days passed. The alchemy stone suddenly lit up. Moreover, all 7 halos lit up at the same time. Someone had passed the 7th trial. It must be Xie Yuezhang. Sure enough, Xie Yuezhang stood up not long after. When the Gudan Tower's apprentice came to record the result, it clearly showed that Xie Yuezhang had indeed passed the 7th trial. Shocking! This was the same as Lin Yongcheng, tied for the best result so far. Those who had passed the trial had to leave immediately. Thus, those who liked to watch the show couldn't take the trial too early. They had to wait inside, and no one would rush them to take the trial. Ling Han was about to step forward when he heard another commotion coming from behind him. Wu Zixu. Alchemist Riang. Another 2 heavyweights had arrived. However, one was young while the other was old. The contrast was quite obvious. Ling Han didn't mind. He strode toward the alchemy stone, sat down cross-legged, and placed his right hand on it. At the same time, Wu Zixu and Alchemist Riang also began their trials. Ling Han's sea of consciousness shook, and he appeared in a dark void. There was nothing around him. A stalk of medicinal herbs suddenly appeared out of thin air, right before Ling Han's eyes. This was the first trial, identifying the medicinal plant. Ling Han casually said, "Azure feather grass." Shwa. This stalk of medicinal herb immediately dimmed and was replaced by another stalk of medicinal herb. Searing sun wood. Poisonous tiger tail vine. Firecloud lotus. Ling Han named more than 30 medicinal plants in one breath. After that, no new medicinal plants appeared. Instead, there was a brief silence. He knew that he had passed the first trial. Outside, a halo was flashing on the alchemy stone. However, passing the first trial was too easy. Even with the addition of Wu Zixu and Alchemist Riang, no one was surprised. At the start of the 2nd stage, 3 stalks of herbs appeared in front of Ling Han, and each stalk was about the same size. Choose the purple-scaled flower among them. A cold voice sounded in Ling Han's ear. Ling Han stretched out a finger. The 3 herbs disappeared at the same time, and then another 4 herbs appeared, all of which were very similar. Find the 3 pure lotuses. Then there were 5 stalks, 6 stalks, 7 stalks, 8 stalks. More and more medicinal herbs appeared at the same time, and it became harder and harder to pick out the correct medicinal herb. However, this was not a problem at all for Ling Han. After more than 30 times, no new herbs appeared, which meant that Ling Han had passed another round. 2 halos lit up on the alchemy stone at the same time. So fast. Is this Wu Zishu or Alchemist Riang? Wu Zishu, right? I think it's Alchemist Riang. At this moment, everyone was a little interested and started guessing. After a short while, 2 more halos lit up at the same time. One is Wu Zishu, and the other is Alchemist Riang. Worthy of being the chosen one, their strength is very close. However, just as everyone was sighing, the alchemy stone flashed as 2 more halos appeared at the same time. And what was going on? Could another dark horse have appeared? Impossible, it must have started the trial earlier, but the passing speed was too slow, so it just so happened to be completed now. Yes, that should be the case. Everyone nodded, feeling that this conjecture was the closest to the truth. In the spiritual world, 3 more herbs appeared in front of Ling Han. At first glance, they were exactly the same. Which scarlet firmament herb has reached 40 million years of age? The cold voice appeared. Ling Han smiled and pointed with his finger. Swoosh, the 3 herbs disappeared, and then 4 more identical ones appeared. Which pentacloud lotus has reached 300 million years of age? Ling Han was extremely casual. His grasp of basic knowledge had reached a very precise level. After another 30 or so attempts, Ling Han once again passed the test. Buzz. 3 halos lit up at the same time on the alchemy stone. Again. Is it Wu Zishu or Alchemist Riang? This really makes one's heart itch. Swoosh. 3 more halos lit up at the same time, and in just 1 or 2 breaths' time, all 3 halos lit up at the same time. Everyone looked at each other in dismay, revealing a doubtful expression. If the previous one was just a coincidence, then what about this one? How could there be so many coincidences? Could it be that another dark horse has appeared? I don't think so. The first 5 trials are relatively easy for those with a bit of strength. The real test is starting from the 6th trial. That's reasonable. Thus, when 4 halos lit up at the same time 3 more times, everyone was still puzzled, but they were not too surprised. When the day was about to end, 5 halos lit up at the same time for another 3 times in a row. I don't believe that this person can keep up with Wu Zishu and Alchemist Riang. Yes, that's right. Although there was no confirmation, everyone believed that 2 of the 3 were Wu Zishu and Alchemist Riang. They just didn't know who the 3rd person was. The 6th trial. This was a little more difficult. What appeared in front of Ling Han was a herb that had been cut into pieces, and his task was to reassemble it within the prescribed time limit. He waved his hands, and pieces of fragments flew around in a rhythmic manner. This was the spiritual world, and all the restraints in reality did not exist. Therefore, this speed was completely dependent on the acuity of the spirit. Ling Han's speed was getting faster and faster, and a herb also showed its embryonic form from nothing, and then slowly became complete. When there was still half of the prescribed time limit, Ling Han had successfully finished his work. Next, another pile of herb fragments appeared. Ling Han looked carefully and found that although these fragments seemed to be picked from the same herb, in fact, they belonged to 2 different herbs. It was just that the species of the herb was the same. The subtle difference was in the year. This was a little tricky. Ling Han slowed down a little. First, he divided the fragments into 2 piles, each belonging to the same herb, and then it was the same as before. When 2 complete herbs appeared, Ling Han still had more than 1/3 of the time. Simple. Then, another pile of herbs appeared, but this time they were divided into 3 herbs, all of which were cyan mist grass. Ling Han could be sure. Come on. First, he divided them into 3 piles, and then restored them one by one. Done. Next were the fragments of 4 medicinal herbs, then 5, 6, all the way until there were more than 30 of them. The difficulty grew higher and higher, causing Ling Han to spend more and more time. However, in terms of time limit, he was able to save a large amount of time every time. After Ling Han finished the task, he wanted to come again, but no new fragments appeared. He suddenly realized that he had passed the 6th trial. Outside, 6 halos lit up at the same time. It's the 6th trial. Who is it? Can the black horse still keep up? But everyone waited and waited, and they did not see the 6 halos light up at the same time for a second time. Chapter 2084. He amazed everyone with a single brilliant feat. Although one's ability to recognize medicinal ingredients did not necessarily mean that one's alchemy level was high. Since ancient times, only 7 people had passed the 8th trial of the alchemy stone. Was this not enough? If this kind of famous person who would go down in history was not recruited into the ancient Pill Pagoda, wouldn't it make the alchemists of the world laugh to death? Wu Zixu is really too strong. No, it's Alchemist Riang. It's definitely Alchemist Riang. After a brief silence, the scene fell into a state of chaos. Everyone was boiling, shouting the names of Wu Zixu or Alchemist Riang excitedly. At this moment, Alchemist Riang suddenly withdrew his hand and stood up. It's Alchemist Riang. Some people were so excited that their scalps went numb. Although it had nothing to do with them, when the person they supported won, they were still inexplicably excited and jumped up and down. Those who supported Wu Zixu were dejected, as if they had lost a battle. Alchemist Riang's face was full of pride with a faint smile on his face. This time, the result was better than he had imagined. The time taken to pass the 7th test was almost 1 hour longer than before. An apprentice from the ancient Pill Tower ran over. He was clearly a snobbish person. Previously, when he was registering the results of others, he had a cold and indifferent look, but now, his face was full of smiles, and he seemed to be very flattering. Of course, Alchemist Riang was very likely to join the ancient Pill Tower. Once he joined, he would naturally have the status of an alchemist, which was many times more prestigious than an apprentice like him. Therefore, he naturally had to put on a very, very humble attitude. Moreover, even if Alchemist Riang could not enter into the ancient Pill Tower this time, wouldn't there be a next time? As long as he became a 4-star alchemist, he would definitely be able to enter into the ancient Pill Tower. Congratulations, Master Riang, the apprentice said. I'll check the results for you. Master Riang nodded with a reserved look. You've passed 7 trials. The total time you spent was 2 days and 11 hours, the apprentice said. What? Passed 7 checkpoints. The crowd burst into an uproar. In that case, the person who passed the 8th test was not Alchemist Riang. Hearing the noisy crowd, Alchemist Riang revealed a look of displeasure. What are you guys talking about? How can you be so noisy? What a scandal! Although I'm awesome, you guys don't have to make such a big fuss. It must be Wu Zixu. Heavens, Wu Zixu passed the 8th stage. The strongest in an epoch. You can't say that. Although many 5-star grandmasters couldn't leave their names on the alchemy stone when they were young, they definitely have the strength to do so now. It's just that they don't want to do it anymore. But you can't deny that Wu Zixu is heaven-defying. Alchemist Riang's expression changed immediately. What? Wu Zixu passed the 8th round? How is that possible? Naturally, he had also tried the 8th stage, but he failed not long after he started and was expelled from the spiritual world. Fake, it must be fake. How could a mere junior surpass him and reach a height that countless predecessors could only look up to? 8 trials, that would leave his name in history. The old man felt like he had suffered 10,000 points of damage. The entire world was devoid of love. After a while, Wu Zixu opened his eyes, withdrew his hand and stood up. Wu Zixu! Wu Zixu! Wu Zixu! His supporters were waving flags and shouting war cries. They were extremely excited. Who would have thought that there would be a sudden turn of events? It turned out that Wu Zixu was the truly amazing one. Their eyes were too sharp, so they naturally wanted to cheer for him. This was also a way to support him. Wu Zixu was a bit baffled. He knew that he was very prestigious and was considered one of the top young alchemists. After all, there were many geniuses, and the Western immortal domain was too big. It was impossible to gather all the geniuses here. However, did they have to be so crazy? He himself only passed the 7th stage. This is indeed amazing. Congratulations, young Master Wu, for breaking history and becoming the strongest genius of an epoch. Young Master Wu, I want to follow you. I also want to follow you. Some people congratulated Wu Zishu while others expressed their loyalty. Following a master like this was a great honor. What? Wu Zishu was baffled. After entering the spiritual world, his body was only an empty shell. He couldn't hear or see, so he didn't know what happened earlier. The strongest genius of an epoch. Although he also secretly thought so, how could he say this kind of thing? After all, he hadn't made any convincing achievements, so how could he be called the strongest? Pa. That apprentice from the ancient pill tower ran over again. His face was also full of flattery, and it was even more intense. It couldn't be helped. Wu Zishu was too young. If he could also become a 3-star alchemist with 4th refinement, the earlier he achieved it, the greater his potential would be. He might even become a 5-star alchemist. How could such a genius be offended? He had to do his best to please him. Congratulations, young Master Wu. The apprentice smiled so widely that a flower was about to bloom. Let me check the results for you. Wu Zishu, like Grandmaster Riyang before, had a reserved smile on his face. Pa. Grandmaster Riyang walked over and said, "The new generation really surpasses the old. In front of you, I have to admit that I'm old." With his interruption, the apprentice immediately shut his mouth and didn't dare to interrupt. Wu Zishu was even more baffled. Although he indeed didn't take alchemist Riyang seriously, thinking that the latter was already a faded flower and could only be a stepping stone for him to surpass, he didn't seem to have done very well, did he? Strange, are you deliberately mocking me? No, the expression on this face doesn't look like it. It looks like he's lost his soul, as if he was hit by a blow. Could it be that the old man only passed 6 tests? So useless, too weak. He showed a look of disdain, and an arrogance of being ashamed to be associated with him rose in his heart. Seeing that Wu Zishu didn't speak for the moment, the apprentice finally found an opportunity and said, "Young Master Wu, your result is 7 tests, using 2 days and 20 hours. Pooh. Instantly, everyone choked, and even alchemist Riyang was stunned. Fuck, what's going on? It's not Wu Zishu, nor alchemist Riyang, then who is it? A dark horse, an absolute super big dark horse. Who is it? I'm dying of curiosity. Hurry up and reveal the truth." That's right, he has passed 8 tests, why hasn't he stood up yet? Hearing the complaints and exclamations of the crowd, Wu Zishu felt dizzy and almost fainted. What? Someone actually passed the 8th test. No wonder alchemist Riyang congratulated me. It turns out that he thought I passed the 8th test. In all honesty, if I could pass the 8th test, I would definitely be arrogant now. Can someone really pass the 8th test? It wasn't that he hadn't tried, but he soon failed, which made him feel that the 8th test was simply not something a human could pass, at least not now. Perhaps after reaching 4 stars, he might be able to do it. Who on earth is it? At this moment, Ling Han's body trembled slightly, and he slowly opened his eyes. Chapter 2085. A Beautiful Romance. Ling Han didn't stand up immediately because after passing the 8th trial, a huge change had occurred in the spiritual world. Pill recipes appeared in front of him, all of which he had never seen before. Excited by the sight of them, he couldn't help but record them down one by one, engraving them into his memory. Thus, he spent a bit of time. In the spiritual world, the icy voice said, "Leave your name. It can be branded and it will never be destroyed." "What rank can it be?" Ling Han asked. "3rd," the voice replied. "Only 3rd?" Ling Han shook his head. "Then forget it." He didn't want the names of 2 people to suppress him until the end of time. What he didn't know was that the two people in front of him weren't even 3-star alchemists. Rather, they were on the verge of breaking through to 5-star alchemist, and they were here to review their alchemy recognition abilities, which was why they were able to suppress him. If Ling Han took the alchemy recognition test when he became a 4-star alchemist, then the time he needed to pass through the 8 trials would definitely be much shorter, and it would be very easy for him to reach first place. There was nothing to be done about it. In the field of alchemy, he was the unrivaled monarch. After saying, "Forget it," Ling Han was kicked out of the spiritual world. Thus, he opened his eyes and stood up. No one gave him a second glance, because no one believed that he had passed the 8th trial. Wasn't that the case? If this genius had completed the test, then the alchemy stone would display his name, or perhaps his code name or his title. Not leaving his name? No one would have thought that there was such a possibility. This was a story that would be passed down for thousands of years to come. Even alchemist Ri Yang and Wu Zishu raised their heads to look. They desperately wanted to know who this person who had surpassed them, and who could even be called the strongest person in this epic, was. At this time, that apprentice came again. He eagerly ran toward Ling Han, a look of extreme shock on his face. As an apprentice of ancient Pill City, he had more information than others. For example, he had obtained Ling Han's result through a special connection stone. The 8th trial. Heavens, if this news were to spread back to the ancient Pill Tower, perhaps those elders would personally run over and fight to take Ling Han as a disciple. If someone was a little more observant, they would be able to see the shock, reverence, and ingratiation on his face, and then they would be able to guess a thing or two. Unfortunately, everyone was curious about who this super dark horse was. Who would have the mood to pay attention to a tiny alchemy apprentice? Young Master Ling, the apprentice called out respectfully. There was Ling Han's registration information on the connection stone, and now he had to confirm once again that the two Ling Hans were the same person. He couldn't be mistaken for someone else. "I'll check the results for you," he said in an inquiring tone. When the people at the side heard this, they did not find it strange. Wasn't this apprentice supposed to be very arrogant? Other than those who had passed the 7th stage, he had never been so polite to anyone. What was going on? It was as if he wanted to kneel down and lick Zhang Xian's boots. He should be a disciple of some alchemy grandmaster. Maybe it's someone from the ancient Pill Pagoda, purposely running over to show off. Fuck, I hate this kind of people the most. Everyone expressed their disdain for Ling Han. A pretentious rich kid made people want to beat him up. Ling Han nodded very casually. "Your result is past the 8th stage. The time is..." A wave of exclamations instantly drowned out the remaining words of that apprentice. The monster who had passed the 8th stage was actually him? Heavens! The few people who had previously ridiculed Ling Han wished that there was a hole in the ground for them to crawl into. Even if Ling Han was really a pretentious spoiled brat, his pretentiousness was earth-shattering, causing others to only admire him. "Hey, this person looks a little familiar. Young Master Ling Han. Right, he's Ling Han." "What Ling Han?" Hee, you guys can't be saying that this Ling Han is that Ling Han who slaughtered Tian Qingyue and the other 3 super emperors, right? What kind of joke is that? They must have the same name. Right, they must have the same name. It's said that Ling Han only has yang soul cultivation, but he is a super emperor who can slaughter heaven souls. His talent in martial art is simply overturning the present and the past. How can such a person be a monster in alchemy? That's right, and it's said that Ling Han is as big as a rock. That's obviously wrong. Ling Han almost spat out. Why were they still talking about as big as a rock? Fuck, who made that up? If they stood up, he would beat them to death. However, he also seems to be a yang soul. And he looks very similar. He's called Ling Han again. Hiss. After going one round, everyone gasped. They were more and more convinced that the two Ling Hans were the same person. Then, they began to exclaim and hold their heads. They felt as if their outlook on life had instantly collapsed. How could there be such a monster in the world? Have you checked? Ling Han asked that apprentice. That apprentice nodded hurriedly, wishing that he could kneel down to Ling Han. Ling Han smiled. Then I'll be leaving. I'll see you off, young Master Ling. That apprentice did not care that someone had just finished the test. In front of Ling Han, everything else was not important. Ling Han turned and strode off. However, he had only taken a few steps when he was stopped by someone. It was Wu Zixu. Ling Han, right? Wu Zixu's expression was full of dissatisfaction. I am Wu Zixu. I admit that your ability to identify medicinal herbs is stronger than mine. This was not nonsense. How many people in history had passed the 8th stage? At least, those below 3-star alchemists could pass the 8th stage. Now, with Ling Han included, there were 8. I need your acknowledgement. However, alchemists still need alchemy ability. In the next 2 rounds of tests, I definitely will not lose to you, Wu Zixu said resolutely. Ling Han only smiled faintly. In alchemy, his opponent had always been himself. As long as he surpassed himself, no one could be his opponent. He was not like martial art or a true monster like Nameless G. Just you wait, I will definitely defeat you. Wu Zixu threw out these words and left first. Getting ahead of Ling Han seemed to be a kind of demonstration. I want to be ahead of you. However, he had finished the medicinal herb identification test, so he should actually leave. However, his status was relatively high, so for the time being, no one went to chase him away. But if time passed, no matter who you were, you would still have to leave. Ling Han laughed. What a young man, only so impulsive. Alchemist Ri Yang also walked over, but only looked at Ling Han, not saying anything. Old man, you also have a belly full of energy. Do you plan to defeat me in alchemy? Ling Han said with a smile. Although it is somewhat inappropriate to challenge a young man like you, this involves my reputation and dignity, so I will definitely do my best to defeat you, Alchemist Ri Yang said. He was a true old alchemist, and had long since touched the threshold of 4-star alchemy. However, he was always that little bit away from crossing over. Perhaps this opponent, Ling Han, was the opportunity for him to surpass himself. With a small outburst, he knelt down and begged for votes and rewards. Chapter 2086. Alchemist Ri Yang also strode out. The bold words had been spoken, and there was no point in saying anything else. They'd see the results 7 days later. The first round was medicine identification, the second round was pill refinement, and the third round was spirit refinement. The results of the 3 rounds were added together, and the first place in the overall score would be the first place in this alchemy competition. Ling Han returned to the inn, but after a while, there were many visitors. Some people were here to check out Ling Han's background. If he had a powerful background, then they'd be on good terms with him. If not, then they'd think of a way to recruit him. Some people were purely curious and wanted to know what this freak looked like. However, because Ling Han had once slaughtered Tian Qingyue and other super monarch tier cultivators, many forces hesitated, afraid of offending these powerful celestial king tier forces. Ling Han couldn't be bothered to deal with them and let Fu Yu take charge. This guy was born to do this. He put on airs and people sucked up to him, having a good time. The medicine identification test continued. 2 days later, the results of another alchemy genius were also out. Pan Luoling, 7th stage. However, no other dark horses appeared, and under Ling Han's brilliance, Lin Yongcheng, this dark horse, was already eclipsed. Almost no one mentioned him anymore. Another day later, someone came to visit. There were naturally people who wanted to see Ling Han every day, but these few guests today were people Fu Yu didn't dare to refuse. Ling Han. He pushed open the door and entered, followed by 3 young people, 2 men and 1 woman. The men were all handsome, and the woman was as beautiful as a flower, exuding a heroic spirit. Ling Han recognized one of them, Lin Yongcheng. This is Yuan Tongguang, young Master Yuan. Fu Yu introduced, a look of awe on his face. Young Master Yuan's ancestor is an elder of the ancient Pill Tower, a 5-star alchemist. 5-star alchemist, that was the peak of alchemy. Though Fu Yu also had a 4-star alchemist grandfather, in front of Yuan Tongguang, he couldn't stand tall at all. The difference between a 4-star grandmaster and a 5-star grandmaster was like the difference between an ascending origin tier and a celestial king tier. The difference was far, far too great. This is young Master Lin Yongshang, and this is Fairy Pan Luoling, Fu Yu continued, pointing at the remaining man and woman. Although Ling Han was dissatisfied, he did not blame Fu Yu. In front of Yuan Tongguang, it was hard for Fu Yu to say no. Whether it was the ancient pill tower or the 5-star Grandmaster, Fu Yu was completely suppressed. He couldn't refuse. I am Ling Han. Ling Han decided to give Fu Yu some face. Fu Yu immediately heaved a sigh of relief as if a heavy burden had been lifted from his shoulders. He had brought them here without permission and was afraid that Ling Han would be angry and chase them away. If that were to happen, he would be in a difficult position. You go out first, Yuan Tongguang said to Fu Yu with a hint of arrogance on his face. Did he think that he was the owner? Fu Yu looked angry and wanted to flare up. However, he forcibly suppressed it, turned, and left the room, closing the door behind him. Yuan Tongguang sneered. Fu Yu's behavior couldn't be any more normal in his eyes. Who dared to go against him, the heir of the ancient pill tower? Ling Han didn't make a sound. If Fu Yu was willing to resist, he was willing to support him, but if Fu Yu wanted to swallow his anger, then he couldn't be bothered to stand up for him. Ling Han. Yuan Tongguang looked at Ling Han, the corners of his eyes raised slightly, and looked down at Ling Han with a condescending attitude. I came to tell you a piece of good news. In view of your extraordinary performance in medicine identification, I can privately take you back to the ancient pill tower and introduce you to my ancestor. Ling Han only smiled and stared at Yuan Tongguang, disapproving in his heart. What a joke! Just based on his medicine identification ability, he was completely qualified to enter the ancient pill tower. Did he need this person's introduction? And he even acted as if he was the one who had promoted him. With such a high attitude, where did this sense of superiority come from? Yuan Tongguang didn't care what Ling Han thought. As far as he was concerned, as long as he extended an olive branch, who could resist the temptation of entering the ancient pill tower? You don't need to participate in the next competition, Yuan Tongguang continued. Ling Han was surprised. So this was the other party's real purpose. Not letting him participate? Ling Han shook his head and said, I don't think it's your concern whether I participate or not. Yuan Tongguang's expression suddenly became gloomy, and he glared at Ling Han. You dare to refuse my good intentions? I don't see anything good. Ling Han looked back at him. Yuan Tongguang wanted to fly into a rage, but he restrained himself. Ling Han, don't think that you can be arrogant just because you have some talent in medicine identification. You should know that as long as I say the word, even if you enter the ancient pill tower, you will have to kneel. How could Ling Han accept such a threat? And the more someone threatened him, the more he would fight back. His eyes immediately became cold and he said, Oh, how do you want to deal with me? Ling Han, why don't you accept my kind advice? Pan Luoling spoke in a gentle tone, but the words she said were not pleasant to hear. Young Master Yuan is the grandson of an elder of the ancient pill tower. It's not an exaggeration to say that he is the young master. You are an enemy of the master. If you don't humiliate yourself, what is it? Ling Han thought for a moment and understood. This guy is doing this for you, right? He had heard from Fu Yu that Pan Luoling had teamed up with Yuan Tongguang, and one of the top 3 had already been decided. But from the looks of it, the other party's ambition was not limited to this. He was aiming for the first place. Thus, if a formidable opponent like Ling Han was persuaded to give up the competition, then Pan Luoling's chances of winning would naturally increase. I don't know what you are talking about. Pan Luoling's face immediately became frosty. You only have one chance. Otherwise, I will make it so that you can't even enter the ancient pill tower, Yuan Tongguang said coldly. Ling Han laughed loudly. If the ancient pill tower could be controlled by trash like you, then why would I go to such a shitty place? Would I be looking for trouble? Come at me if you have any tricks up your sleeves. I'll take them all. You really refuse a toast only to drink a forfeit. Yuan Tongguang slammed the table. But, although this table was made of top-notch materials, he was a ghost expert. How could he bear it? It immediately fell apart. I already said that there is no need to go through so much trouble. I will defeat him, Lin Yongchang suddenly said. Yuan Tongguang glanced at him and said, but I want Luo Ling to become the first place. If I say it together with you, do you think others will dare to go against me? Lin Yongchang said disdainfully. Ling Han was surprised. From Lin Yongchang's tone, it seemed that his status was no lower than Yuan Tongguang's. Yes, this guy must also be from the ancient Pill Tower, and then he was the legendary pretentious criminal. He had deliberately concealed his identity, but both his strength and status were frighteningly high. All right. Yuan Tongguang nodded. Lin Yongchang was a descendant of another elder in the ancient Pill Tower, and he was also the only son. In terms of status, Lin Yongchang was much higher than Yuan Tongguang. Furthermore, he was an alchemy genius, so Yuan Tongguang had to give him face. Ling Han, in another 4 days, you will be utterly defeated by me in front of everyone's eyes, Lin Yongchang declared proudly. There was also a hint of defiance in his voice. In terms of recognizing medicinal ingredients, he had actually lost to Ling Han. This made him feel very humiliated. Let's go. The three of them were about to leave. Wait, Ling Han said. Chapter 2088. If Ling Han's actions today were to spread, it would definitely scare people to death. He even dared to extort someone from the ancient Pill Tower. He was tired of living. But Ling Han had done just that. In any case, he had already offended the Celestial King tier force behind Tian Qingyue and the others, so what if there was another ancient Pill Tower? Because of Ling Han's results in identifying medicinal herbs, his payout rate had also been dropping, and had even surpassed Xie Yuezhang and the others. It was only a measly 1-1-6, and he could be said to be the hot favorite to become the champion now. 3 days later, the pill concoction competition began. After the first round of eliminations, there were about 1,300 participants left. This was still a little high. The Alchemy Plaza of the 100 Dragons City did not have so many alchemy rooms to concoct alchemical pills for so many people at the same time. Thus, every 100 people formed a group, and they would proceed in batches. They would be able to complete all the competitions in about a dozen or so days. Ling Han, alchemist Ri Yang, and the others were all arranged to appear in the last group. This was arranged according to their results in identifying medicinal herbs. The better their results, the later they would appear. And everyone believed that the final champion would definitely be born from the last group. Time passed quietly. 12 days later, it was finally Ling Han's turn to appear. Ling Han set off with the 3 women, and Fu Yu also followed them. They had just stepped out when they saw Xiao Gu walking over. Xiao Gu, where have you been all this time? Ling Han asked. Though Xiao Gu's name had the word Xiao in it, in reality, it was an old skeleton that had existed for who knew how many years. Thus, it naturally could not have entered the 100 Dragons mystery realm, and no one knew where it had been these past few days. Xiao Gu, where have you been all this time? Xiao Gu imitated. Even its expression and tone were exactly the same. Forget it, I'd better not ask. Ling Han smiled and continued forward. Xiao Gu also followed them. Not long after, they arrived at the Alchemy Plaza. This place was very large, and was specially prepared for alchemists. Pill concoction competitions would be held regularly, and every alchemy room had the effect of accelerating time by 100 times. Therefore, it usually took 1 to 2 days to refine the pill in the outside world. The concoction time for a 4-star pill was about 6 months, but for a 5-star pill, the concoction time would instantly jump to 10,000 years. Moreover, this was only for the first heavenly layer. The 9th heavenly layer would even require a long period of time recorded in eras. At the very least, up until now, no one had ever refined a 4-star medicinal pill. Hence, the first few groups' competitions were all settled in a single day. Everyone entered the alchemy room one by one. Then, outside each alchemy room, there was an alchemist and 3 apprentices in charge of supervising to prevent anyone from cheating. Of course, the spectators could also play this role. Ling Han also entered, sat down, and waited for the competition to begin. Everyone had to prepare their own alchemy materials, and of course, the refined pills would belong to them. What kind of pill should I refine? If it was a little more reliable, it would definitely be refining a 3-star pill. But it was said that alchemist Ri Yang, Wu Zixu, and the others were only a step away from becoming 4-star alchemists. Perhaps they would break through in this alchemy competition. In this way, Ling Han's lead in recognizing medicine would be erased. Even if everyone's results were the same, a 4-star alchemist would definitely be able to perform 5 spirit refinements. Then, in the 3rd round of spirit refinement, the other party would obtain a true advantage. Ling Han shook his head. He could not accept failure. Then he would refine a 4-star pill. There was a blazing fighting spirit in Ling Han's heart. He had yet to successfully refine a 4-star pill and was always lacking that final step. He always felt that he was lacking something. Would the pressure this time turn into motivation? Ling Han wanted to give it a try. If he failed, so be it. He had not much interest in entering the ancient pill tower in the first place. Making a name for himself here was only to attract Lu Herong over and bring them back to the Rock Palace. Yuan Tongguang actually used the matter of entering the ancient pill tower to threaten him. He was really ridiculously wrong. Fine, then he would refine a 4-star pill. There was a hint of madness in Wu Zixu's eyes. At first, he had planned to refine a 3-star pill. Moreover, it was the Ice Phoenix pill that was the most difficult to refine among 3-star pills, but now he had changed his mind. He should not be able to defeat Ling Han with this 4-star alchemical pill. He felt as if something in his heart was about to break. This was a sign that he was about to break through to the 4-star alchemist level. He had felt this before, but it had not been as strong as it was now. It gave him a strong feeling that he would definitely succeed today. Just wait, he was the #1 alchemy prodigy. Alchemist Ri Yang gently caressed his own pill furnace. This furnace had accompanied him for tens of billions of years, and could completely be considered a part of his body. It was more important than his lover or children. Normally, no one could touch it. But as he caressed it, he suddenly exerted force in his palm. Instantly, multiple cracks appeared on the walls of the pill furnace, and instantly covered the entire furnace. This pill furnace was actually forcibly shocked. When refining, pill furnaces were all designed to be resistant to fire. Thus, their ability to resist attacks was very poor. Who would desperately slap their pill furnace when refining alchemical pills? A pained expression appeared on alchemist Ri Yang's face, but there was even more determination in his eyes. Without destruction, there would be no construction. He had not broken through for a long time because he had stayed too long in the memories and glory of the past, so he had never wanted to come out. But now, he had a reason to win. Thus, he personally smashed the pill furnace that represented his past. Today, it was a new beginning. Alchemist Ri Yang's aura instantly underwent a drastic change. His gaze was sharp, and he felt as if he had become a completely different person. The path of becoming a 4-star alchemist would begin today. A genuine smile finally appeared on Xie Yuezhang's face, which had always been smiling. He was the standard example of a late bloomer. He had actually spent as long as 1 billion years to become a 1-star alchemist, but he had actually only spent 1 billion years to become a 2-star alchemist and a 3-star alchemist. Another 1 billion years had passed, and he had enough confidence to advance to 4-star, and now was the opportunity to push open the door to becoming a 4-star alchemist. She decided to concoct a 3-star alchemical pill, and it was the phase pill that she was most skilled in. There was no need for it to be too difficult, because she had a secret weapon. The one who will win will definitely be me. Lin Yongchang's expression was filled with arrogance. Who knew that he had already become a 4-star alchemist 60 years ago, and the strongest alchemist here was only a 3-star alchemist. He was completely bullying them. When he had been identifying medicinal herbs, he had actually almost succeeded in the 8th stage. It was only because of some small mistakes that he had failed at the last moment. But in the field of alchemy, he had absolute confidence. He did not care about the title of champion, and he would voluntarily withdraw from the competition after impressing everyone with a single brilliant feat. What he wanted was the shocked and disbelieving expressions of others. That would make him feel very good after he had won. Then he would magnificently withdraw from the competition, showing off to the extreme. You're just a mere 3-star alchemist, and you actually dare to suppress me? This time, I'll let you know what a true genius is. The spectators had all arrived, and were eagerly anticipating the start of the alchemy competition. Different from identifying medicinal herbs, in which nothing could be seen at all, alchemy was very lively. Why is the crystal wall over at Pan Luoling's place so blurry? We can only see her rough appearance, but can't see the medicinal herbs in her hands? Someone suddenly asked curiously. It was more refreshing to read on a phone. Chapter 2089. There seemed to be a problem with Pan Luoling's alchemy room. Only a very blurry image could be seen from the outside. Though her appearance could be seen, and it was indeed her, everything else was too unclear. Someone reacted, but the reply from the ancient pill tower was that there was a small problem with this alchemy room, but the competition was about to begin, so they couldn't call a halt at this time and affect the others. In any case, it was just a little blurry, and wouldn't affect the overall situation, so they left it at that. Though this kind of excuse was not very satisfactory, who dared to question the people of the ancient pill tower? There were no more problems, so they could begin. After the order was given, the competition of the last group also began. Ling Han had long since been studying 4-star alchemical pills, and had even received guidance from Grandmaster Zicheng. He had discussed with this Grandmaster many times, and was only a step away from success. He took out the celestial medicine. Celestial medicine was naturally required to concoct celestial pills, but the grade of the alchemical pill was different, and the age requirement for the celestial medicine was also different. Generally speaking, concocting a 3-star alchemical pill required a celestial medicine of 10 billion years old, and a 4-star alchemical pill required a celestial medicine of 100 billion years old. As for a 5-star alchemical pill, the celestial medicine required was measured in trillions of years, and even an epoch was not rare. That was naturally 9th heaven's celestial medicine. Even Ling Han only had a small piece of this kind of celestial medicine. It was an inconspicuous root that looked like ginger, but in terms of value, it was enough to make most 4-star alchemists feel a sense of embarrassment. Turtleporia was 400 billion years old, and had been specially prepared by Grandmaster Zicheng for him. Even someone as wealthy as Grandmaster Zicheng felt his heart ache when he took out such a good thing. Ling Han also felt his heart ache because this turtleporia could only be used a few times. Previously, he had already tried to concoct it a few times, and the consumption of the celestial medicine was very great. This was the main ingredient, and of course, there were some supplementary ingredients. The majority were saintly medicines, and there were also some celestial medicines that were around 100 million years old. Ling Han took a deep breath, and was in no hurry to start concocting. There was a time acceleration of 100 times here, so time was relatively less valuable. Secondly, the time limit for the competition was 10 days. Under the acceleration, there would be around 3 years. This was more than enough time to concoct a 4-star alchemy pill, and he would fail several times. Ling Han calmed himself down. After a full 7 days, he finally began to move. His movement was like a bolt of lightning, as fast as lightning. Under the acceleration of time, time flew by, and before long, 3 months had passed. Path Pill Furnace exploded, and it even blasted Ling Han's face black. 2 more chances. Ling Han murmured. It wasn't that he didn't have enough time, but he only had enough materials for 2 more attempts. He was not in a hurry to start the second time. Instead, he closed his eyes and recalled the details of his failure. Unfortunately, he couldn't enter the Black Tower under the watchful eyes of so many people. Otherwise, it would only take a moment for him to reflect under the reincarnation tree. He sat there for half a year before starting his second attempt. Everything progressed smoothly, but when the 5th month arrived, the pill furnace exploded again. I'm so close to the finish line. Ling Han felt that it was a pity. If I still had 3 portions of materials, I would have 100% confidence that I could succeed, but now, I only have one last chance. It's either succeed or die trying. He once again began to sit there and reflect, and after another half a year, Ling Han opened his eyes, revealing absolute confidence. This time, he would definitely succeed. He was the kind of person who could explode with endless motivation the more he was forced into a corner. Right now, he already had no way out, but he wasn't anxious or impatient in the slightest. On the contrary, his fighting spirit was like fire, his confidence soaring, and his desire for success filled him with passion. Come. He began his third and final attempt. If he still failed this time, he would only be able to concoct a 3-star alchemical pill. Outside, people came out in succession. Some people had already succeeded long ago, but they were not satisfied with their current situation. They wanted to concoct an alchemical pill that was more satisfactory, and so they continued to concoct. However, when the time in the outside world reached the 8th day, most people had already finished concocting, and all walked out of the alchemy room, handing over the alchemical pill they had concocted to be appraised. Pa! The alchemy room door opened, and a young man with a slender figure walked out. Quick, Wu Zixu is out. What alchemical pill did he concoct? After so long, it must be a 4-star alchemical pill. That's not for sure. He might have concocted several cauldrons of 3-star alchemical pills. As the crowd discussed, Wu Zixu strode out, a sliver of pride on his face. He had succeeded. He wasn't defeated by the pressure, and instead completed his self-improvement, successfully opening the gates of a 4-star alchemist. From now on, he could be called a grandmaster, a true grandmaster of alchemy. He handed the alchemical pill he had concocted to the alchemist outside for appraisal, his hands behind his back, appearing very confident. Incomplete Dao pill, 4-star, normal standard. After a simple observation, that alchemist gave his conclusion. Instantly, the surroundings were in an uproar. 4-star alchemical pill. Finally, someone had successfully concocted a 4-star alchemical pill. At present, this result was the undisputed first place. As expected of Wu Zixu, he managed to break through and become a 4-star alchemist even under this kind of pressure. Heavens, how old is this guy, and he's already a 4-star alchemist. Sigh, this is called talent. We can't be envious. Everyone looked at Wu Zixu with envious eyes. This time, those who had come to participate in the competition were basically 3-star alchemists. 2- and 1-star alchemists were completely too embarrassed to come. At most, they would only test their ability to identify medicinal ingredients in the first round of the competition. The difference between 3-star and 4-star alchemists was like the difference between Immortal Palace tier and Ascending Origin tier. It was as if one was heaven and the other was earth. This time, Wu Zixu will definitely be the first place. After this round, his score will be able to tie with Ling Han, but a 4-star alchemist must have reached the 5th refinement in spirit refinement. Thus, he will definitely be able to win in the 3rd round. I said it long ago, Wu Zixu will definitely be the first place this time. Thankfully, I bet on Wu Zixu to win the championship, and also a few 100,000 star stones. I also bet all my fortune on Wu Zixu. Just at this moment, the door to the alchemy chamber opened again, and an old man with a fluttering white beard walked out. Alchemist Ri Yang. How is it? Everyone became curious again. This was a veteran alchemist, and it had long been said that he would become a 4-star alchemist, but year after year, Alchemist Ri Yang still remained at the same spot. However, no one dared to underestimate him. Alchemist Ri Yang showed a smile, and opened his hand. There was a purple alchemical pill spinning in his palm. Heavenly Purple Jade Pill, 4-star. An alchemist beside him blurted out. Then, he clasped his hands in salute to Alchemist Ri Yang. Congratulations, Alchemist Ri Yang, for finally advancing into the ranks of 4-star alchemists. Alchemist Ri Yang smiled faintly, and stroked his beard. He appeared very reserved, but the curl of his lips betrayed him. He was obviously extremely proud of himself. It's hard to say now. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.